I was 32 when my mom told me not to come to my sister's wedding. Her exact words were, "Don't even think about coming to the wedding. I don't want your face ruining a single photo." Not, "Maybe we should talk," or "Let's find a way to make this work," or even something passive-aggressive. Just straight-up exile. It wasn't even shocking at that point, just numb. Like when you touch ice for too long and forget it's supposed to hurt. That night, I got a text from my sister, Megan. For words, "Maybe if you weren't so pathetic, you'd be worth inviting." No emoji, no punctuation beyond that period, like she'd thought about it, edited it, and made sure it landed sharp. I stared at the screen for a long time before locking my phone and setting it face down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sigh. I just sat back on my old beige couch and stared at the popcorn ceiling like it might blink first. Let me rewind a bit. I'm Alex, by the way. Grew up in a small town where reputation mattered more than reality. You smiled in public, cried in private, and plastered achievements like wallpaper over every crack in the family. Megan, my younger sister by 4 years, was the golden child. Blonde, bubbly, and somehow able to fail upward. Dropped out of college? She's following her own path. Got fired from 3 different jobs in 2 years? Her managers were intimidated by her confidence. When she got engaged to Ryan, who, by the way, is the kind of guy who calls wine grape juice for grown-ups, my mom acted like Megan had won a Nobel Prize. Me? I work in IT, live alone, have no criminal record, pay my bills on time, and bring a covered dish to every family gathering. But I've never been photogenic, never been inspiring, never been whatever illusion they built around Megan. I was the background noise in the family album. And apparently, even that was too loud for them now. The thing about being the invisible sibling is that no one notices when you're doing the actual work. Like how Megan and Ryan's dream wedding venue. Yeah, that booking was under my name. Because I put the deposit down as a surprise gift 6 months ago when I was still trying to convince myself we could be a real family. Megan had been gushing about the venue since she was 17. Some lakeside estate with ivy-covered arches and swans or peacocks or some other impractical bird that poops on everything. It was her fantasy, and I thought maybe, just maybe, helping her get it would mean something. I paid the deposit in full, $3,000, non-refundable if canceled within 30 days. She never even said thank you. Just told our and it worked out and bragged to her followers about manifesting the perfect wedding spot. I stayed quiet. Because I'd spent most of my life believing that love was quiet, that it didn't need applause or recognition, that if I just kept showing up, eventually someone would notice. Instead, I got disinvited. No explanation, no nuance, just a command. When I told Mom it felt hurtful, she blinked at me like I'd said something in another language. "It's Megan's day," she said, like that explained everything. "You've never been close anyway, and she doesn't want any bad energy." Bad energy? That was rich, coming from the woman who once screamed at a waitress for putting dressing on the side instead of mixing it in. But sure, I was the curse. I didn't argue. I just nodded and left early. Drove home in silence. Sat in my apartment and watched the sun dip behind the ugly gray buildings across the street. And that's when Megan's text came in. I think a part of me broke in that moment. Not in the dramatic, shattered glass way you see in movies. More like when a bone shifts just enough to stop working right. I kept rereading her words, waiting for the apology that never came. My hands didn't even shake. I just smiled. A real, strange, hollow smile. And then I opened my laptop. The venue had a cancellation policy. One I knew by heart, because I'd read every clause back when I booked it. Cancel within 30 days, and the deposit's gone. Cancel before that, and you can get most of it back, or transfer the date to another event for a small fee. I glanced at the calendar. 28 days. Barely. Just under the wire. Megan had cut it close. She always did. The confirmation email, invoice, and contract were all under my name. They'd never transferred it. Never thought to. Because why would they? I was just the background noise. I didn't cancel it that night. I didn't want it to be a tantrum. I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to mean something. Over the next 2 days, I kept an eye on her Instagram. The venue was all over it. Videos of her twirling on the dock. Slow-mo shots of Ryan dipping her dramatically while some pop song played in the background. My mom commented on every post with heart emojis and hashtags like #DreamWedding and #SoBlessed. Ryan posted a picture of the contract folder, my signature, captioned, "Locking it in. The best day of our lives awaits." On day 3, I went to the venue in person. Walked in wearing a button-up and my nicest shoes. The coordinator, Camille, recognized me immediately. "Oh, Alex, right? Everything's going smoothly. We sent over the guest list draft for approval." I held up a hand. "Actually," I said calmly, "there's been a change of plans." She blinked. "Oh." I laid out the policy, showed her the paperwork, explained that due to personal issues, the reservation would need to be canceled. I asked if there was a waiting list. There was. A couple had been trying to book that date for their anniversary vow renewal. "Do they want it?" I asked. Camille called them. They said yes within 5 minutes. She handled the rest. I didn't ask for the refund. I didn't care. I signed the release, thanked her, and walked out into the sunshine like I hadn't just flipped the first domino. Then I waited. Not a word from Megan. Not a single heads up. Probably because she thought I didn't have the spine to do anything. Or worse, she forgot I was involved at all. She probably thought Ryan had booked it. He didn't. He just showed up to the tour and took selfies. All bark, no paperwork. 10 days out from the wedding, Megan posted a video doing a venue walkthrough in a white dress and heels, captioned "Final Prep." "Can't believe it's almost here." That was when I knew they still hadn't noticed. They hadn't called the venue. Hadn't confirmed anything. They were coasting on vibes. 5 days out, I got a call from Camille. "Hey, just wanted to thank you again for how smooth that transition was. The new couple is so grateful. They're even adding custom lights for the dock. It's gonna look stunning." 3 days out, silence. Then, the night before the wedding, less than 12 hours before the guests were supposed to arrive, I finally got a call. It was Mom, and I didn't pick up. She called again. Then again. By the 5th missed call, I finally turned the phone over and stared at the screen. Her name glowed there like a mosquito bite, small, persistent, irritating. I didn't answer. I didn't want yelling. I didn't want fake apologies. I didn't want her to accuse me of ruining anything, when the only thing I'd ruined was their assumption that I'd keep taking it forever. Then my phone buzzed with a text. Mom texted, "What did you do? The venue says it's booked under someone else. They said it was canceled. Call me now." I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of orange juice, walked over to the window, and watched the traffic crawl by below. The sun had just started to dip behind the rooftops, that weird golden haze making everything look like it was being filmed for a perfume commercial. I took a sip and waited. 30 seconds later, another text came in. Megan texted, "What did you do? You ruined my wedding. You selfish, jealous, pathetic." She went on, paragraph after paragraph. Caps lock. Exclamation points. At one point, I think she threatened to sue me. I didn't read most of it. Just scrolled slowly, one thumb flick at a time, marveling at how fast they could pivot from ignoring me to making me the center of the universe. I finally got a call from Ryan. His name popped up, and I actually laughed. Like a full, stupid, breathless laugh. Ryan had never called me in his life. Not for a birthday. Not for a "thanks, man," when I helped move furniture into their first apartment. But now? Oh, now he needed a word. Did I answer? Of course not. I wanted silence. I wanted them to stew, to squirm, to sit on their perfect, expensive, flour-coated lie and realize they hadn't even thought about logistics. They just assumed that because I handled it, it would stay handled. But no, when they kicked me out of the wedding, they kicked out the one person who was actually holding it together. Around 7 p.m., Megan posted a black screen on her Instagram story with the caption, "Sometimes family betrays you worse than any stranger ever could." Cue the violin. An hour later, Mom called again. But this time, she left a voicemail. Her voice was the kind of calm you only hear when someone's about to lose it. The inhale before the scream. "Alex, I don't know what you think you're doing, or what you think this proves, but you've gone too far. This is Megan's wedding. Her special day. She's devastated. You don't want to be remembered as the bitter, spiteful brother who ruined something beautiful. We're giving you one last chance to fix this. Call the venue. Make it right." I saved the voicemail. Not for legal reasons. Just because I wanted to remember how quickly they could twist a knife and call it a handshake. At exactly 9:42 p.m., my building's power flickered. Not from some symbolic storm or anything. Just the city grid being old. Still, it felt oddly perfect. Like the universe was giving me a soft spotlight for what came next. I sat down, opened my blinds, and looked out over the city. Far in the distance, though not far enough, I could see the venue's roof. A tiny speck by the lake, barely visible. The swans, or peacocks, or whatever they'd rented, would be wandering around aimlessly now. The chairs would be neatly stacked. The arbor, if it was even up yet, would be getting disassembled. And somewhere, probably in a hotel room with wilting flowers and a melting cake, Megan was realizing that hashtags and filters couldn't uncancel a wedding. I leaned back, set my phone on the armrest, and let out a slow, even breath. I hadn't ruined her wedding. She had, by pretending I didn't exist, by weaponizing guilt and exclusion, by forgetting that I was the one who made her fantasy possible in the first place. They never asked me what I wanted, never once thought to include me beyond what I could do for them. And now? Now they were going to learn what silence really sounded like. The next morning was supposed to be the big day. Sunrise ceremony, violinist by the dock, a champagne breakfast with hand-painted flutes. I knew all of this because I'd seen the planning folder. Megan left it on my coffee table during one of the rare times she visited, back when she still needed my credit card. At 6 a.m., I got a knock at my door. It wasn't loud, just 3 polite little taps. I knew before I opened it who it would be. And when I did, there she was, my mother. Hair up, sunglasses already on despite the morning chill, face frozen in that tight little expression she wore whenever she was 2 seconds away from lying through her teeth. Her mouth opened, but before she could say a word, I held up one finger. "Let me guess," I said. "You came to apologize, right? Not because you mean it, but because you need me to undo the damage." She didn't blink. She just whispered, "Alex, you don't understand what you've done." I tilted my head, slowly, like I was listening for a sound in the distance. Then I nodded. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't understand. I don't understand why it took this for you to realize I was even in the picture. I don't understand how you can spit in someone's face and then be shocked when they stop cleaning your messes. But I do understand this." I stepped back and gently pushed the door closed. It didn't slam. Didn't need to. It was soft. Final. And on the other side, I heard nothing but silence. The door stayed shut. I didn't lock it for dramatic effect or anything. I just stood there, hand on the knob, listening to the quiet breath of the hallway. I could still feel her presence through the wood, like a ghost who hadn't quite accepted she was dead yet. Eventually, I heard her heels click away, one slow step at a time, retreating down the hallway like she was waiting for me to call her back. I didn't. I went back to the couch and sat down. Didn't check my phone. Didn't make coffee. Just sat. The city was waking up. Horns, birds, the occasional clatter of garbage bins. But up here it still felt like midnight. I'd expected to feel something, guilt, triumph, maybe even anxiety, but what I felt instead was space. Like I'd been carrying a bag of bricks for years, and someone finally said, "You know you can put that down, right?" I didn't hear from Megan all morning. No texts, no threats, no apology. But around 11:45 a.m., her fiancé Ryan decided to go full panic mode. He posted a long, frantic Instagram story that started with "to our friends and family" and ended with "we were blindsided." The middle part was a jumbled mess of passive-aggressive whining. Due to unforeseen circumstances, betrayed by someone we trusted, real love isn't about venues. It was practically dripping with fake humility. Like if he added enough sad music and puppy-eyed expressions, people would forget he once told me I look like the IT guy from a discount sitcom. Naturally, the comments poured in. "OMG, what happened?" Sending love, heart emoji. "Wait, isn't your brother the one who helped book the venue?" I watched it all unfold from the couch, sipping the same glass of juice I hadn't finished the night before. By now, I was half expecting one of them to just show up with a camera crew and turn this into some sad YouTube vlog. We got canceled by family, but still said "I do." Cue the tears. Cue the monetization. By mid-afternoon, I started getting messages from extended family. Cousins I hadn't heard from since high school. An uncle who once forgot my name at Christmas. All of them suddenly very concerned. "Hey man, saw the post. Is everything okay? Your mom said something about you canceling Megan's wedding. Is that true? Just want to say, whatever happened, hope you guys can work it out. Family's important." Right. Family. The same family that never called on my birthday. The same family that RSVP'd, maybe, to my graduation party and never showed. Now they were worried? Now I was worth the effort? I ignored every message. But there was one that I didn't delete right away. It was from Aunt Doreen. Not a fan favorite, to be clear. She'd always been a little too blunt, a little too tan, and a little too obsessed with her Pomeranians. But her message just said, "Heard what happened. Been waiting years for you to stop being the family's doormat. You good?" I stared at it for a long time. Then, finally, I replied, "Yeah, I think I am. That night, the wedding did happen, sort of. Not at the lake, not with the swans, and definitely not with the catered, champagne-drenched fairy tale they'd promised their friends. No, they scrambled and threw together a backyard setup at our grandparents' house, which would have been fine if it hadn't rained. Hard. Like, thunderclap every 15 seconds hard. Megan's dress got soaked. The rented canopy collapsed. The makeshift DJ setup shorted out mid-song. There's a photo floating around Facebook now, blurry, dimly lit. Half of Megan's mascara running down her face while she tries to smile through gritted teeth, holding a bouquet that looks like it got salvaged from a highway ditch. But the best part? Ryan's cousin live-streamed the whole thing. And somewhere in the middle of the video, you can hear Megan whisper, hot mic and all, "I swear to God, if he doesn't fix this, I'll make sure his life is over." She didn't say which she meant. Could have been Ryan. Could have been me. But the venom in her voice didn't care. A few days later, the calls started again. This time, less angry. More strategic. First it was Mom. She left a voicemail pretending nothing had happened. "Hey sweetheart, hope you're doing okay. Just wondering if you had time this week to help me with the printer. I think it's jammed again." Then Megan tried. A text. One word, seriously? I didn't answer. Then Ryan reached out, pretending to be the bigger man. His message was a masterpiece of half-hearted diplomacy. "Look, I get it. You were hurt. Things were said. But families shouldn't go to war over one bad day. Let's meet up. Talk it out. Fix things." I left him on read. And then, finally, Megan sent the text that made me pause. "So what's your endgame here? You got your revenge. You happy now?" I stared at that one longer than I expected. Because for a second, I wasn't sure how to answer. Was I happy? Did I feel better? It wasn't like in the movies. No music swelled. No great epiphany. Just quiet. The kind of quiet where you finally realize you don't owe anyone an explanation. But even still, part of me knew this wasn't over. Because Megan doesn't just lose. She rebrands. And I had a feeling she was about to try something bigger than an apology. Or worse, something that looked exactly like one. She didn't message again for a few days after that last text. No more calls from Mom. No fake olive branches from Ryan. Nothing. The silence was eerie, like the calm before a second storm. Except this time, I wasn't sure which direction the thunder would come from. But I knew Megan too well to think she was done. Megan never ended things quietly. If she couldn't win with a wedding, she'd try with a funeral. And if there wasn't one available, she'd host her own pity party and send out RSVP cards to everyone she thought could be weaponized. It was a Thursday afternoon when the next attempt came. I was at work, head down in code, running diagnostics for a mid-sized company's internal server issues, when I got an email notification. The subject line read, "We're sorry. Let's talk?" It was from Megan. She had sent it from her new email address, one she created just for the wedding. The signature at the bottom still had the cheesy tagline, "Ryan and Megan's forever begins now." I almost didn't open it. But curiosity is a persistent itch. Inside was a long, carefully written note, or at least carefully crafted. You could smell the performance in every sentence. She started by saying how difficult things have been, how emotions got the better of us, and how no one's perfect, least of all me. She then pivoted into guilt-tripping mode, writing how sad it was that I missed her big day and how much she wished things could have gone differently. There was a part that genuinely made me choke on my coffee. "You've always been the fixer in this family. Maybe that's why it hurt so much when you broke something instead." She ended with this, "Let's be adults. Come to dinner. Just you, me, and Mom. No drama, no accusations. Just talk. We're still family." I sat back, staring at the message for a solid 5 minutes. It was a test. Not a real apology, just a probe to see if I was still within reach. Still weak enough to fold. She wasn't sorry I canceled the venue. She was sorry it worked. Sorry I'd stopped being useful. This wasn't about mending the relationship. It was about reasserting control. But I was done playing their games. So I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up a draft I'd started the day after the wedding, one I hadn't planned on sending, but now felt like the perfect moment. It was addressed to every single vendor Megan and Ryan had booked using my connections or referrals. The caterer, the DJ, the florist, the photo booth company, even the officiant, who I knew personally from college. I explained the situation in brief, told them I was no longer affiliated with anything regarding Megan's event planning business, because yes, she was now trying to spin the botched wedding into a launch for a lifestyle brand. and asked them to remove my name from all correspondence. Then I took it a step further. I created a public post on Facebook where most of our family still lingered and laid it all out. Not in a bitter tone, not with name-calling or spite, just the facts. Many of you have reached out to me regarding the wedding and the situation with Megan and Mom. I appreciate the concern. For transparency, I was the one who originally booked and paid for the venue. When I was told I wasn't welcome at the wedding, not just uninvited, but explicitly banned, I canceled my reservation. I did not ruin anything. I simply removed myself from something I was no longer a part of. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I'm done being silent. It exploded. Half the comments were from people saying they had no idea or couldn't believe Megan would say that. A few of the older relatives stayed neutral, posting things like, "Family's complicated. Hope it works out." But the younger cousins? They rallied. One of them DM'd me saying, "Dude, I knew something was off. She's been awful to you for years. Respect for standing up." For the first time in my life, I wasn't the shadow in the room. I was being seen. Megan, of course, lost it. She posted a 5-slide Instagram story filled with pastel backgrounds and cursive font, where she talked about toxic energy, setting boundaries, and healing from betrayal. It was clearly meant to sound enlightened, but the passive aggression was so thick you could spread it on toast. Then she unfollowed me, blocked me, which was funny, considering I hadn't followed her in the first place. But here's where it gets really satisfying. About 2 months later, I got a call from Ryan. I almost didn't recognize the number. I answered out of habit. "Alex," he said, his voice brittle, like he hadn't slept. "Hey, can we talk?" I stayed quiet. Look, I know we didn't exactly start off great. Or end great. Or, okay, it was all bad. But I wanted to ask you something." I didn't say yes. I just waited. He sighed. "Do you know a good divorce lawyer?" That got my attention. Apparently, Megan's business venture, the wedding brand she launched after the disaster, had flopped hard. She'd ordered a massive batch of custom planners, mugs, and inspirational quote tote bags, but never paid the fulfillment service. Lawsuits followed. She tried to crowdsource donations under the pretense of rebuilding from trauma, but people weren't buying it anymore. Her story had holes. Her pity campaign had fizzled out. And Ryan? Well, Ryan was tired of being the Instagram prop. "She's not who I thought she was," he said, his voice low. "She's exhausting, man. I feel like I've been living in someone else's influencer fantasy." I didn't say, "I told you so." I just gave him a name, a lawyer I trusted. Then I wished him luck and hung up. In the months that followed, my life got quieter. Better. I finally took the trip I'd been putting off, flew to Ireland, saw the cliffs, ate way too many potatoes, and didn't check my phone once. When I got back, I signed the lease on a new apartment with more light, more space, and no memories. I stopped answering any messages from my mother. I changed my number. Let go of the idea that they'd ever understand me. And then, one day, something wild happened. I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a card with a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses and 3 words in big font. "You were right." No signature. No explanation. But I recognized Megan's handwriting. I sat down, stared at it for a long time, then tossed it into a drawer. Not because I needed to keep it, but because it no longer hurt. She'd finally said something true, and that was enough. I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already won. I was 15 the first time I realized just how disposable I was to my own family. My name's Brian, and back then, I thought I understood what it meant to be part of a family. You grow up thinking you can trust the people around you, your mom, your dad, your siblings. That even if things weren't always perfect, blood meant something. That family had your back, especially when the world didn't. I wasn't naive, not completely, but I definitely wasn't prepared for what happened that night, or what came after. At first glance, we probably looked like a normal family from the outside. Dad was this towering presence, loud, opinionated, a bit old school. He believed in tough love, though most of the time, the love part felt optional. Mom was quieter, softer, the one who made sure things didn't fall apart. She was always the buffer between Dad and us kids. My older brother, Jake, was 17 and knew how to play everyone like a game of chess. And then there was me, 15, average in most ways. I didn't cause trouble. I kept to myself, and I tried, really tried, to stay out of the crossfire. But that didn't stop me from becoming the perfect scapegoat. Jake and I used to be close when we were younger. I mean, we fought like any siblings, but we'd build forts in the backyard, stay up late talking about video games, even team up when our parents argued. But somewhere around the time Jake hit puberty and realized he could manipulate people, things shifted. He figured out that he could get away with nearly anything as long as he spun the right story. And Dad ate it up. Jake could lie through his teeth and still walk away with a pat on the back while I got grilled for things I didn't even do. It started small. A broken lamp here, a missing charger there. Jake would say, "Brian did it." And that was that. No questions, no chance to explain. I'd get grounded or lectured, and Jake would smirk when no one was looking. I told Mom a few times, hoping she'd see through it, but she'd just sigh and tell me to be the bigger person. "He's older, but he's still figuring things out," she'd say. "Just ignore him, Brian. It's not worth the fight." But it was. It was worth the fight. I just didn't know how to win. Things really came to a head in early October, right as the weather was starting to turn. That week had been tense. Dad was stressed about work, Jake was acting weird, and Mom had been staying late at her job. I could feel something building, like a storm you can't see, but just know is there. And then Friday happened. I got home from school like normal, dropped my bag, grabbed a snack, and went to my room to play some guitar. I was learning this one song I'd been obsessed with for weeks, and for once, I felt calm, peaceful, like maybe the weekend would be quiet. I was halfway through the chorus when I heard Dad yelling my name from downstairs. Not just calling, yelling. The kind of tone that curdles your stomach instantly. "Brian, get down here." Now, I froze. I hadn't done anything. I ran through everything in my head. Did I forget to do the dishes? Was there a chore I missed? I set the guitar down gently and headed downstairs, heart thudding in my chest. Dad was standing in the living room, arms crossed, face red. Jake was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, playing the innocent act he'd perfected over the years. There was a shattered picture frame on the coffee table. A photo of our family, now splintered across the glass like some kind of metaphor. "You think I'm stupid?" Dad snapped the second I stepped into the room. "Jake told me everything. You broke this and tried to lie about it. Then you laughed in his face when he asked you to help clean it up." My jaw dropped. "What? No, don't you dare lie to me," he cut in, voice booming. "Jake saw you throw your backpack at it when you got home. Then you walked away like it was nothing." I looked at Jake, eyes wide. "That's not true. I didn't even come into the living room. I went straight upstairs." Jake didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just kept staring at the floor, biting his lip like he was the victim here. I turned back to Dad, trying to stay calm. "I swear, I didn't do it." "Of course you did," he barked. "You're always careless. Always looking for attention. You think this is a joke? Breaking things, lying about it." "I didn't. Enough. Go to your room. And don't expect to come out for the rest of the weekend." "But," I said go. I bit down on the urge to argue more. I knew from experience that nothing I said would matter. Once Dad made up his mind, that was it. I glanced at Jake one last time before turning around. His face was blank, but I caught the tiniest twitch of a smile as I walked away. That night, I sat on my bed in silence. No music, no distractions, just me and the growing sense that something was broken, really broken, and not just the picture frame. I kept thinking, why would Jake do that? What did he get out of it? Did he actually enjoy watching me get punished? I didn't sleep much, and the weekend only got worse. Every time I came downstairs, I was met with cold stares or clipped words. Jake strutted around like a golden child, offering to help with dinner or take out the trash like he was some kind of saint. And Dad lapped it up. I could feel myself shrinking inside my own home, like I didn't belong anymore. It wasn't until Monday morning that I found out what really happened. I was grabbing my backpack from the hallway when I heard Jake in the kitchen talking to someone on the phone. "Nah, it was easy," he said, laughing softly. "I just told him Brian did it." He flipped out like always. My heart stopped. I stepped closer, barely breathing. "Yeah, dude." He didn't even question it. Grounded him for the whole weekend. I didn't even have to fake being upset. Worked like a charm. I stepped into the doorway. Jake jumped, phone slipping slightly from his ear. His eyes met mine, and for a second, we just stared at each other. No words. No excuses. Then he smiled. Shrugged. Oops. I don't know what came over me, but I just turned around and left. I didn't say anything to him. Didn't yell, or punch a wall, or cry. I just walked out the front door and kept walking. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. My chest felt hollow. My throat was tight. I didn't want to be in that house for another second. It was raining, cold and steady. The kind of rain that seeps into your clothes and chills you to the bone. I didn't bring a jacket. Didn't even grab my phone. I was 3 blocks away when I heard my name. Brian. I turned, and there was Dad, standing under an umbrella, face twisted in anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? I didn't answer. You think you can just storm off like some dramatic little brat? Get back to the house. No, I said, barely above a whisper. What did you say? I looked him in the eye. I'm not going back. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Then his voice dropped to a low growl. You're not welcome in this house if you're going to act like this. I didn't fight back. I just nodded, turned around, and walked. I didn't see where he went. I just kept walking. 2 weeks later, I came back. Not because I forgave anyone, but because I didn't have much choice. I'd been staying with my friend Carson's family, sleeping on a pull-out couch in their basement. His parents were kind, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. I needed clothes. I needed my school books. I don't know, closure maybe. When I stepped through the door, it was like nothing had changed. Jake was on the couch, eating chips and playing video games. Dad was in the kitchen, laughing with some of his co-workers from the auto shop. They were loud, cracking jokes and telling stories. And then I heard it. Yeah, kicked him out in the rain, Dad was saying, chuckling. Little punk thought he could defy me. Let him walk. Maybe that taught him something. The guys laughed. I stood frozen in the hallway, every word sinking in like a stone. And then I saw her. Mom. She was standing just behind Dad, holding a grocery bag in one hand. And the look on her face. I'll never forget it. She'd heard every word. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something change in her eyes. Something sharp. Something cold. And I knew. Everything was about to shift. I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet were frozen to the floor as I watched Mom stare at Dad like she'd never seen him before. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there with her keys still in hand, the grocery bag starting to slip from her fingers. I remember watching an apple roll out and hit the floor. No one noticed. Not Dad, not Jake, not the co-workers still howling with laughter. But I did. And I knew something irreversible had just cracked open. Then, quietly, Mom set the rest of the bag down and turned around. She walked past me without saying a word, but for a split second, our eyes met. I expected disappointment or maybe guilt, the kind of look she usually gave me when Dad was being harsh. But this time, it was different. It was fire. I didn't see what happened next, at least not right away. I grabbed a hoodie from the stairs and left again, not sure where I was going. I ended up sitting behind the corner store a few blocks away, just watching the rain hit puddles for what felt like hours. My phone was dead. I was soaked through again. But I felt still. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't anxious or hurt or confused. I was angry. Not the kind of anger that burns out quick, but the kind that sinks into your bones. Slow, steady, focused. When I finally came back home later that night, something had shifted in the air. The living room was quiet. The guests were gone. Jake's game console had been unplugged, and Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea like she hadn't just watched her husband laugh about exiling his kid in the pouring rain. Come sit, she said without looking up. I hesitated. Is Dad? He's in the garage. Don't worry. I sat. The tea in front of me was still steaming. You didn't tell me, she said. You didn't say what he said to you that night. I figured you already knew. I didn't, she said quietly. Jake told me you stormed out after breaking something and screaming at Dad. I looked down, jaw clenched. Of course he did. But then I heard what your father said today, she added, her voice flatter now. And suddenly a lot of things made sense. We sat in silence. I'm sorry, she said, and I flinched. Not because of the apology, but because it sounded real. Too real. Like she'd finally seen everything I'd been quietly living through. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. But that moment should have been the start of things getting better. It wasn't. Because that was the moment Jake realized he was losing control. And he did not take it well. The next few weeks were a slow, suffocating spiral. Mom started questioning things more, asking Jake for his side and mine, checking in with me privately, giving me the benefit of the doubt in a way I wasn't used to. At first, it felt like I was finally being seen. But it also painted a target on my back. Jake didn't like the attention being taken off him. He was used to being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the favorite, the future. And suddenly Mom wasn't hanging on his every word. Suddenly she was spending more time with me, asking about school, watching my guitar practice, making sure I had dinner before disappearing for the night. Jake noticed. He started small. Petty sabotage. My phone charger would vanish from my room. My homework mysteriously went missing. One day I found all my socks soaking wet in the bathroom sink. I didn't have proof, but I knew. It was him. His smug little smirk when I came downstairs looking for my stuff told me everything. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he'd get bored eventually. But Jake wasn't wired like that. If he couldn't be adored, he'd settle for being feared. And when he couldn't control the narrative, he'd burn the whole thing down. One night, I came home from school to find Dad pacing in the living room with this wild look in his eyes. Jake was sitting on the stairs, head bowed like some sad little martyr. "Where is it?" Dad snapped the second he saw me. "Where's what?" "You know exactly what." "I really don't." "The $200 from my top drawer," he said. "Gone." My stomach dropped. Not because I took it, but because I knew where this was going. "I didn't take anything," I said. "Why would I even?" "Jake saw you going into our room yesterday." "I was looking for Mom." "Don't lie to me." I looked at Jake, who had the gall to look hurt. "I saw him go in after school." I didn't think anything of it until I overheard him on the phone bragging about having cash for a new amp. My mouth went dry. What? That's not. "I'm done with the lies," Dad shouted. "I should have never let you back in this house." "I didn't. You think I'm stupid? You think I wouldn't notice when money goes missing the same day you're bragging about gear?" "I never said that. Ask Carson. Ask literally anyone. I haven't been saving for anything. I've been working at the corner store every weekend to pay for that amp. You can check with Mr. Hernandez." "Yeah." Dad scoffed. "We'll see what your manager says." He stormed off. I stood there trembling, not from fear, but fury. And Jake just smiled and walked past me like nothing happened. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the times I let things go, all the times I didn't push back, every lie Jake told, every punishment I took, every time Dad believed him without question. I realized something important. They wanted me to stay quiet. They needed me to. But I wasn't going to anymore. The next day at school, I went to the guidance counselor. I told her everything. Not just about the money, but about the months leading up to it. The pattern, the lies, the treatment at home. She listened. She wrote things down. She nodded a lot, but I didn't know if any of it meant anything. Still, it felt good to say it out loud. When I came home that afternoon, Dad was waiting for me with his arms crossed. Jake was already on the couch, eating chips like nothing happened. "You told your school we were abusing you?" Dad growled. I froze. "Your counselor called. Said they're opening a case. Said someone's coming to do a home visit." Jake was smirking now. "Nice one, Brian. Real mature." Dad took a step closer. "You think this is a game? Bringing strangers into our house? You want to humiliate your family? Fine. But you better pray they find something, because if they don't, you're out. For good." I looked at Mom, who had just walked into the room carrying laundry. Her eyes were wide. "You threatened him?" she asked. "He's trying to ruin us," Dad barked. "He wants to tear this family apart because he's too lazy to take responsibility." "He's 15, she snapped. "You're a grown man. You don't get to threaten your child just because he finally spoke up." That shut everyone up. But not for long. 2 days later, the social worker came. She talked to all of us separately, asked questions, took notes. I told her everything, again. She was patient, but her face gave nothing away. I didn't know if she believed me. I didn't know if anything would come of it. But Jake did, and he panicked. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Mom was yelling. Dad was roaring. Jake was crying. I came downstairs and saw it. Mom holding Jake's phone, open to a group chat. There were screenshots, photos, messages, stuff Jake had been saying to his friends. Things like, "Watch this. I'm gonna get Brian kicked out again, and my dad believes anything I say, El Mayo." There were videos too, one of him pretending to cry after breaking a plate, another of him mocking me after I got grounded. It was all there. Everything. I stood there frozen as Jake tried to defend himself. It was just jokes. They're my friends. None of it's real. But Dad wasn't listening. Mom wasn't either. And for once, the silence wasn't mine to carry. I thought this would be the moment things finally turned around. That Jake would face consequences. That maybe, just maybe, I'd be believed without having to drag the truth into the light. But what happened next? That was worse than anything I'd imagined. Because instead of punishment, instead of an apology, instead of justice, they made me the problem. Again. And what they did next, that was the breaking point. It's funny how people always say the truth will set you free, like the moment you drag it into the light, everything wrong will suddenly flip itself right. I used to believe that. For a long time, I held on to this quiet hope that if I just waited long enough, stayed patient, and kept my head down, the truth would eventually fight for me. But it didn't. Not at first. After the group chat was exposed, after Mom saw the messages and the videos and every bit of smug manipulation Jake had stashed on his phone, I expected something, anything, to shift. There was yelling. There was crying. There were threats thrown like knives across the living room. But in the end, nothing really changed. Not in the way that mattered. Because somehow, I still ended up being the one blamed. It started with Dad. He didn't say a word at first. Just stared at Jake. Then at me. Like the weight of the truth was too heavy for him to admit he'd been wrong for years. Then he shook his head and muttered something that still haunts me. You could have handled this privately. I blinked. What? You didn't have to humiliate your brother like that. You went through his phone. You think that's okay? I didn't go through anything. Mom did. And what are you even talking about? He's the one who set me up for months. Lied. Got me kicked out. He said it himself. He did it all on purpose. He's a kid, Dad snapped. He's still learning. You should have talked to me like a man instead of crying to your school. My heart dropped. There it was. The wall. Even with all the proof laid out in front of him, even with Jake's own words echoing through the house, Dad couldn't see past his pride. He didn't want the truth. He wanted control. And in his eyes, I had broken the chain. Mom tried to stand up for me. At first, she defended me that morning, challenged Dad in a way I'd never seen before. But it didn't last. By dinner, she was quiet again. Distant. When I asked if she was okay, she just looked tired. I'm trying to keep this family together, Brian, she whispered. You don't understand how hard that is. I did. But I also knew something else. It wasn't my job to hold the pieces anymore. After that day, things got worse. Not louder, quieter. Which somehow felt crueler. Jake didn't talk to me at all, just walked past me like I didn't exist. Dad barely acknowledged me. Mom only spoke when necessary. There were no more accusations, no more screaming matches. Just silence. Cold, sharp, echoing silence. It was like I had died and no one had the decency to hold a funeral. The home visit with the social worker ended in a shrug. She said there wasn't enough evidence of abuse to intervene formally. Emotional neglect, unfortunately, was a gray area. Monitor the situation, she told my counselor. Let us know if anything escalates. So I stopped expecting help, and I stopped asking for it. I hit rock bottom about a week later. It was a Thursday. I'd stayed late after school helping the band teacher organize music stands, mostly just to avoid going home. When I finally did, the front door was locked. No note. No call. Nothing. When I knocked, Jake answered. He stared at me through the glass for a moment, then slowly, deliberately, closed the door again. I stood on the porch for 20 minutes, waiting, hoping maybe Mom would come open it. That she'd say it was just a mistake. That someone had forgotten I didn't have a key. No one came. Eventually, I left. Again, I went back to Carson's place, soaked through and silent. His mom opened the door before I could knock. Oh, honey, she said softly. Come in. They never asked for an explanation. Just let me shower, gave me dry clothes, made me dinner. Carson and I stayed up that night playing old video games and pretending everything was normal. But I couldn't pretend anymore. That night, I stared at the ceiling in their basement and made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not this time. The next morning, I went to the school office and asked for a meeting with the guidance counselor. I told her everything, again, but this time, I asked for options. Legal options. Housing. Emancipation. Anything. I'm tired, I said. And I'm not safe there. Not really. She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. It didn't happen overnight. But things did start happening. The school connected me with a youth outreach program. They arranged a meeting with a social worker who specialized in at-risk teens. We met weekly. She listened. She actually listened. For the first time in my life, someone treated my story like it mattered. She helped me apply for a student housing program for minors in unstable home environments. It wasn't easy. There were interviews, paperwork, home checks. But Carson's parents vouched for me. So did the band teacher. So did Mr. Hernandez from the corner store. People showed up for me in ways I never expected. Eventually, I got placed in a group home 2 towns over. It wasn't glamorous. 3 kids to a room. Shared bathrooms. Chores every day. But it was safe. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. I started rebuilding, one piece at a time. I got a part-time job at a music shop near the group home. The manager, a grizzled guy named Keith, liked that I could tune guitars by ear. He let me help with repairs. Paid cash under the table until the paperwork caught up. I saved every penny. I enrolled in therapy through the youth program. I didn't want to at first. I'd always hated talking about feelings. But the therapist, Carla, had this way of making you feel like you weren't broken, just rearranged. I told her everything. The lies. The favoritism. The way I'd vanished from my own family. And she didn't try to fix me. She just let me be. At school, things slowly improved. Word got around about what happened, but not in a cruel way. A few kids started sitting with me at lunch. One of the seniors in band invited me to join his garage group. I said yes. We started practicing after school, jamming in his dad's shed. I hadn't realized how much I missed feeling part of something. I also started doing better in class. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because the chaos was gone. Or maybe because, for the first time, I was doing it for me. I even won a small scholarship for a song I wrote and submitted anonymously to a statewide music competition. It was a simple piece. Just me and my guitar. But the lyrics were raw. Honest. The judges called it haunting. I didn't tell anyone it was about Jake. Or Dad. Or standing in the rain at 15, waiting for a door that would never open. The fall was slow, and it hurt. But the rise? The rise was mine. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized something important. You don't need a family that breaks you to feel whole again. You just need to stop waiting for them to heal you. I was rebuilding now. Brick by brick. Step by step. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because as much as I wanted to move forward, there was still a part of me, deep down, that needed something else. Closure. Not the kind you get from forgiveness, but the kind you take back with your own hands. And when that opportunity came, I didn't hesitate. It's strange, the way anger can settle into you like embers after a wildfire. Quiet, almost invisible, but always warm, always burning. For months, I'd buried the worst of it beneath the small victories. My job at the music shop, band practice, the scholarship. Everyone said I was doing great. The school counselor told me I was resilient. Carla said I was healing, and in some ways I was. But there was still a part of me, this stubborn, pulsing ache, that hadn't moved on, that remembered the cold rain soaking my hoodie. Jake smirked through the glass. My father's voice, like a door slamming shut. You're not welcome in this house. That line played on a loop some nights, as I lay in bed at the group home, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't obsessed with revenge, not exactly. I didn't want violence, or some dramatic courtroom scene where I stood up and pointed at them like I was in a movie. No, what I wanted was something much simpler. I wanted the truth to matter. I wanted them to feel what I felt. And I wanted control. That's where it started, the idea. It came slowly, like a guitar riff I couldn't quite get out of my head. At first, it was just a thought. Then a plan. Then a project. And the first piece of that project? Information. People forget that teenagers are always watching. Listening. Taking notes. And I'd spent my whole life doing just that. I knew my dad. I knew how he thought, how he lied, how he boasted, how he never checked the small things because he was too busy puffing up the big ones. I knew how much he cared about appearances, about respect, about being the guy everyone looked up to in his circle. I also knew that Jake was slipping, that the golden child mask was cracking now that I wasn't around to take the heat. I still had mutual friends at the school, people who told me things without knowing they were helping me. Stories about Jake skipping class, getting into fights, mouthing off to teachers. One kid said Jake had started bragging about being able to hack grades and change attendance in the school system. That caught my attention, so I started asking around. Slowly, carefully. It turned out Jake had found a way into the school system, but not through hacking, exactly. One of his friends had an older brother who worked in IT for the district. They'd figured out a backdoor into the school portal using a shared admin account and a password someone had stupidly left on a sticky note in the lab. Jake had been using it for months, not just to fix grades, but to delete absences, submit fake assignments. He even added an extracurricular activity to his transcript that didn't exist, and no one noticed. That was the beauty of favoritism. Everyone gave him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't tell anyone, not yet, because I wasn't ready to move. Not until the next piece fell into place, which it did about 2 weeks later. I was working at the music shop when Keith, the owner, pulled me aside and handed me a thick envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Your competition prize," he said. "They sent it here since you listed the shop as your primary mailing address." Smart, by the way. I opened it. Inside was a check. $2,000. More than I expected. Enough for a new guitar. Maybe even enough for my own secondhand laptop. But I didn't spend it. Not yet. Because now I had the means. And the motive. And just one more thing to do. I reached out to Carson that night. We hadn't talked much lately, just drifted, like people do. But he was still the only person who'd seen what happened to me in real time. He didn't hesitate when I asked to meet up. We got burgers and sat in his driveway like we were 13 again, talking about nothing for a while before I eased into it. "I need a favor," I said. Carson raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" "Nothing illegal. Just quiet." He nodded slowly. "I'm listening." I told him about Jake. The system. The fake grades. The admin login. Carson's eyes widened. "Dude, that's a felony. Only if I expose him wrong," I said. "I don't want to get anyone arrested. I want the school to know. I want my parents to know. I want it all to crash down, not because I shouted it from the rooftops, but because he did it to himself." Carson grinned. "Okay, I'm in. But how?" That's when I told him the rest of the plan. We'd gather proof. Not just screenshots, but video, audio, something that would be impossible to deny. Something I could drop like a hammer at just the right moment. And the right moment? That would be family honors night. It happened every spring. A stupid ceremony the school hosted for students and parents to celebrate academic excellence and moral character. Jake was set to receive 3 fake awards, one for academic performance, one for extracurricular leadership, and one for peer mentorship, whatever that meant. My parents were planning to attend, of course. It was their favorite thing, parading Jake around like a trophy. I wanted that night. But I couldn't just show up with accusations. I needed to build it like a story. So we started gathering. Carson pretended to be interested in Jake's methods. Said he wanted help fixing his own grades. He got Jake talking, got him bragging, got him explaining the whole process again. This time on video, with his phone recording in his jacket pocket. We got everything. The login details. The fake activities. Even a screenshot of Jake adding a volunteer trip to his record that never happened. Meanwhile, I contacted the competition board from the music scholarship. Told them I wanted to donate a portion of my prize anonymously to fund future entries for kids in group homes. They loved the idea. They asked me to attend honors night to receive a special certificate in front of the crowd. Perfect. Now I had a reason to be there. The day of the event, I wore a borrowed blazer and stood off to the side while Jake and my parents schmoozed with the staff. My mom spotted me first. Her face shifted, shock, then hesitation, then something almost like guilt. "Brian," she said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I was invited," I said simply. "Scholarship award." Jake turned around mid-laugh and went pale when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. "Oh, just here to support family. Isn't that what this night's about?" Dad didn't say much, just gave me a once-over and grunted. Typical. The ceremony started. Names were called. Applause echoed. I got my certificate and stepped off stage with a tight smile. Then it was Jake's turn. They listed off his accomplishments, grades, clubs, mentoring, and as the applause rang out, Carson slipped into the back row where I stood. He handed me a USB drive. I nodded. Showtime. I approached the principal after the ceremony, just as she was congratulating my parents. I was polite, smiled, said there was something I needed to show her, something important about the school's online system. She looked confused, then concerned. I handed her the drive. "Everything's on there," I said. "You'll want to look through it carefully." She asked questions. I didn't answer them. Not then. I told her to email me if she needed clarification. Then I left. 2 days later, I got the message. A formal request for a statement. Jake was under investigation for academic dishonesty. But that wasn't the best part. No. The best part came later, when everything I'd been building finally snapped into place. When they found out. And the fallout? It was more than I ever expected. When the principal emailed me asking for a formal statement, I knew the dominoes had finally started to fall. It wasn't instant. Nothing in real life ever is. But the moment I agreed to meet with her and two district administrators the following day, I could practically feel the balance of power shift. They welcomed me into a small conference room with a pitcher of water on the table and a notepad set in front of each chair. It was quiet, professional, and serious in a way that made my palms sweat even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. They played the videos. They asked thoughtful, careful questions. They looked through the screenshots. They even recognized the compromised admin credentials Jake had been using. Apparently, a password reset had gone unnoticed months ago. When they were done, one of the district administrators exhaled slowly and set the last printed screenshot down like it weighed 100 pounds. "Thank you, Brian," she said. "This is a very significant breach. And the fact that a student has been using administrator access to alter academic records is extraordinarily serious." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just nodded. "When will you tell him?" I asked. "We'll notify him and his parents today," the principal said. "And his teachers. And possibly the board, depending on what else we find." "What about the other students?" I asked. "The ones he helped change grades for?" "That depends on the extent of the manipulation," she said. "We have to audit everything." "But Brian, you did the right thing." The right thing. People toss those words around so lightly. But hearing them from someone outside my family, someone who had no reason to lie, no ulterior motive, hit me harder than I expected. I left the meeting knowing the fuse had been lit, and all I had to do now was sit back and watch. The explosion came 3 days later. I was at the music shop, restringing a customer's guitar behind the counter when my phone rang. It was Mom. Not a text, not a voicemail, a call. I hesitated, but picked up. "Hello, Brian." Her voice was thin, strained. "Can you come home? Please. We need to talk." I didn't say yes or no. I just said I'd think about it, and hung up. 10 minutes later, Carson burst through the shop door, breathless like he'd sprinted across town. "Dude, you need to hear this." He told me the whole thing. How Jake had been pulled from class. How Dad showed up at the school raging. How the principal had laid everything out. Every altered grade, every forged entry, every fake hour of volunteer work. How Jake tried to lie, then cried, then lied again, then blamed me, then blamed the IT kid, then said someone hacked his phone. But this time, none of it worked. They had recordings, screenshots, dates, IP logs. Everything was airtight. Jake was suspended pending a full board review. His college prospects? Gone. His peer mentor award? Revoked. His reputation? Ruined. My father? Carson described him pacing the hallway like a caged animal, yelling about conspiracies and vendettas until a district officer told him to step outside or be escorted out. My mother? She cried, but not out of anger, out of something heavier, something that sounded, from Carson's reenactment, dangerously close to regret. Later that evening, after my shift, I decided to go. Not for them. For me. I needed to see the fallout with my own eyes, not out of spite, but to close the chapter fully. To let my younger self, the one dripping with rain, shunned and ignored, finally witness justice without being silenced. When I arrived, the house was chaotic. The living room was a mess. Papers everywhere. A crumpled letter from the school board sat on the coffee table. Dad was in his chair with his head in his hands, breathing hard. Jake sat on the couch, face blotchy and red, eyes swollen. He wasn't crying anymore. He was empty, hollow, like someone had pulled all the swagger and arrogance out of him and left nothing but a scared kid. Mom saw me first. "Brian," she whispered, "thank you for coming." Dad looked up at me with a mix of anger and something he wasn't used to feeling, uncertainty. Jake didn't look up at all. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the room like I wasn't the same 15-year-old they once threw out into the rain. Mom took a shaky breath. "We know everything. The school showed us the evidence. They said you provided it." Dad snapped. "So you've been plotting this for months?" I didn't react. "No, I've been living my life." He's the one who forged grades, made up activities, manipulated a school system, and bragged about it to his friends. Dad stood. "You wanted to ruin your brother." "No," I said calmly. "He ruined himself. I just stopped covering the damage." Jake finally looked up then, eyes red, jaw trembling. "You set me up," he whispered. "No, you set me up for years," I replied. All I did was tell the truth to people who actually listened. The room was so silent I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Mom wiped her face. "Brian, why didn't you come to us?" Why didn't you give us a chance to fix this? I laughed quietly, not out of humor, but disbelief. I tried. For years. I told you about the small things. The lies. The favoritism. You always told me to be the bigger person. You always told me not to cause trouble. And then you watched Dad kick me out in the rain because of something he made up. And when the school stepped in, you both treated me like a problem instead of a son. Mom flinched. Dad clenched his fists. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear. I continued, voice steady, controlled, almost gentle. I didn't come here to fight. I didn't come here to watch you unravel either. I came because I needed you to hear this once, clearly, and without interruption. I took a breath. I'm done. Dad scoffed. What does that even mean? It means, I said, you don't get to have power over me anymore. I'm building my own life. I have a job, a place to live, people who support me. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here to close the door you slammed on me when I was 15. Mom stepped forward. So that's it. We lose you. You lost me the night I begged to come inside and no one opened the door, I said. Tonight isn't about loss. It's about understanding. Jake finally spoke again, voice small. Brian, I'm sorry. I studied him. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. But it didn't matter. Because I wasn't the kid who needed his apology anymore. I hope, I said quietly, you learned something from all this. Not because you got caught, but because you finally felt what it's like to face the consequences you've been handing me for years. He looked away. Mom was crying again. Dad was silent, with anger or shame or both. It didn't matter. I stepped toward the door. Mom whispered, will we ever see you again? Maybe, I said honestly. But not like this. Not with me begging for space or fairness. If you want to be part of my life someday, you'll have to walk toward me. I'm done walking alone. And with that, I left. No dramatic slam. No final scream. Just a quiet click of the door behind me as I stepped into the cool night air. The group home was waiting. My guitar was waiting. My future, one I'd built with my own hands, was waiting. And for the first time, the weight on my chest was gone. Completely gone. As I walked down the street, past the house I no longer feared, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about destroying someone else's life. It was about reclaiming your own. And I had finally done it. I never looked back. Because sometimes, the loudest victory is simply walking away and living a life they never believed you could. Thanksgiving was always a weird holiday for me. I'm Ryan, 27, and for most of my life, I kind of felt like the background character in my own family. Not hated, just tolerated. My sister Jenna was the golden child, my mom's mini-me, perfect grades, perfect fiancé, the whole deal. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the artist, the one who, according to my Uncle Steve, never really grew up. He said that a lot. Uncle Steve is one of those guys who acts like a sitcom dad, but without the charm, loud, opinionated, loves grilling and controlling the people around him. Every year, he hosts Thanksgiving, and every year, I drag myself there because, well, tradition, right? This year felt different. I hadn't heard anything about the dinner. No invite, no family group text, not even a vague, guilt-tripping reminder from my mom. At first, I figured maybe they assumed I'd just show up like I always do. But then I saw photos on Jenna's Instagram. The long table already set, the turkey carved, everyone dressed up, laughing. It was clearly planned. I stared at that picture for a long time, wondering if it was a mistake. Maybe the invite got lost. Maybe they'd just forgotten to hit send. I gave myself every excuse to believe it wasn't what it looked like. But part of me knew. Still, I got in my car and drove to Uncle Steve's place. It was only 20 minutes away, and I told myself if I was wrong, if somehow it was all just a misunderstanding, I'd laugh it off and sit down like nothing happened. But the second I pulled into the driveway, the cold air outside felt warmer than what was waiting for me. Uncle Steve met me at the edge of the driveway. He didn't even wait for me to get out of the car. He just walked up, arms crossed over his beer belly, that smug little grin he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. You weren't invited, Ryan, he said, casual like we were discussing the weather. Go home. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked past him toward the house. Through the wide window, I could see everyone. My mom at the head of the table, laughing. Jenna next to her, scrolling through her phone. Even my best friend, Kyle, someone I grew up with and who usually spent the holidays bouncing between my place and his dad's, was there, raising a glass like he belonged. None of them looked toward the window. None of them noticed I was standing there, just yards away from a celebration I was clearly cut out of. I nodded once. Didn't argue, didn't beg for an explanation. I just turned, got back in my car, and drove a little ways down the road to the nearest gas station parking lot. I parked, leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, and let the silence swallow me. Then I made one call. Not a dramatic one, not some secret agent or lawyer or anything like that. Just a friend. One of those real ones. The kind of friend who knows how messy your family is and never tries to talk you out of being hurt by it. We'd worked on a few side gigs together, mostly graphic design and back-end stuff. But more importantly, she was the manager for a pretty popular social media page, one that just happened to be running a feature that week. Holiday Nightmares. Tell us your story. I told her mine. Every word. Not angrily, not for revenge. Just truth. I told her about the lack of invite, about Uncle Steve meeting me at the driveway, about seeing my mom and sister, and even Kyle laughing inside. I didn't name names, just told the story plainly. She was quiet the whole time. Then she said, I think this fits the theme perfectly. You cool with me posting it anonymously? I didn't even hesitate. Yeah, I said. Go ahead. 20 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. First it was Kyle, then Jenna, then my mom. Missed calls, texts piling in like a broken dam. The post had gone viral faster than I expected. It hit a nerve. People resonated with it. Thousands of strangers weighed in with shock and sympathy and stories of their own families turning cold. I hadn't even opened Instagram or Facebook yet, but I could already guess what was happening. Then, finally, a call from Uncle Steve. I didn't answer. Instead, I just sat in my car and watched the notifications flood in, one after the other. There was something surreal about it. This invisible shift in power. This moment where I wasn't the background character anymore. For the first time, I wasn't quietly taking the hit. I wasn't being the bigger person. I wasn't trying to understand people who clearly didn't care whether I was there or not. I was just done. The calls kept coming. My phone rang again, Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jenna. Then Kyle again. I turned it on silent and sat there, just breathing. And that's when I saw a message come in, a DM request from someone I didn't know, but with a familiar last name. It was a cousin I hadn't talked to in years, one who moved away after a falling out with Uncle Steve over money. The message was short. Good for you. Been waiting for someone to finally say it. And that was when I realized this went deeper than just me being left out of one dinner. It was never just about the invite. It was about the years of silence. The years of swallowing my feelings so I wouldn't be difficult. It was about all the family moments I'd smiled through while feeling invisible. And now, suddenly, people were paying attention, not just strangers online, but the very people who thought I'd never stand up for myself. But it wasn't even about standing up anymore. It was about walking away. And they weren't ready for that. They weren't ready for what came next. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was dark out. The leftovers I'd prepped for myself earlier that morning, just in case, were still sitting in the fridge. Turkey sandwich, cranberry sauce, store-bought pie. I heated them up, sat on the couch, and ate in silence, letting my phone buzz across the counter like a distant alarm I didn't need to answer. I checked the post once, just once, on my friend's page. The comments were rolling in faster than I could read. People were sharing their own horror stories. This happened to me last year. Still haven't spoken to my family. I cried reading this. Thank you for saying it. Families like that don't deserve your silence. Good for you. It wasn't validation I was after, but I won't lie and say it didn't feel like a warm blanket. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this. Then came the group text. At 8:52 p.m., the old family group chat, which had been dead quiet for weeks, lit up. Mom, Ryan, call me. Please. Jenna, what did you do? Kyle, dude, this is getting out of hand. Uncle Steve, take that post down now. You want to air dirty laundry, fine, but you're dragging the whole family through the mud. I didn't respond. Not right away. I needed time. I needed to let the weight of all of it settle, because for once, they were the ones squirming, and I wasn't about to rush to clean up the mess they made. Around 9:30, my mom called again. No voicemail this time, just silence when I didn't answer. Then, at 9:43, she sent a text that caught me off guard. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. Steve said you were traveling. I thought you didn't want to come this year. That stopped me. Traveling? No one had asked. No one had checked. I'd been living 10 miles away this entire year. I hadn't even posted anything about going out of town. It was a lie. A cover-up. Probably something Steve said to excuse my absence when someone asked. I didn't know what hurt more, being excluded, or realizing they'd built a story around why I wasn't there, without even asking if I wanted to be. Then Kyle texted. Kyle, man, I didn't know. I swear I thought you were working or something. Your mom said you'd canceled. I shouldn't have believed her. I'm sorry. It was weak, but it felt semi-honest. Kyle and I had been friends since 6th grade. We'd been through a lot. Video game marathons, high school breakups, even a college road trip disaster that ended with both of us sleeping in a Walmart parking lot. But lately, he'd been drifting. More dinners with Jenna, more laughs with Uncle Steve. I'd chalked it up to growing older, but maybe it was more than that. Maybe he'd started to believe the version of me they told themselves. The unreliable one, the sensitive one, the outsider. Still, I didn't respond. I needed them to sit in it a little longer. At 10:12 p.m., the post was picked up by a bigger page, a national one. My friend messaged me in all caps, "Dude, 40K shares in an hour. It's everywhere." And she was right. When I checked Twitter, there were screenshots. Threads. People were dissecting the dynamic, the manipulation, the entitlement. They were guessing at the family roles like it was a psychological crime scene. Some even tried to figure out who I was, but I stayed anonymous, watching from behind the glass like someone observing a fire they didn't have to put out. That's when the emails started coming in. An HR rep from a tech company I once freelanced for. A former teacher. An old roommate. People who recognized the tone, if not the details. One line from a woman I hadn't spoken to in years stuck out. "I always wondered how you stayed so quiet at those parties. Now I understand. You were drowning." At 11 o'clock, Jenna called. I didn't answer. She tried again, then again, and finally sent a wall of text so long I had to scroll twice to finish it. She said I was overreacting, that I could have just texted her, that I'd blown everything up over one dinner, that I was embarrassing the family, that Uncle Steve's clients were calling him, asking questions, that their neighbors were asking what happened. I read the message twice, then once more, and when I got to the end, I laughed, quietly, bitterly, because in all those words, not once did she ask how I felt. Not once did she apologize. It wasn't about me being hurt. It was about them being uncomfortable. The thing about silence is that it builds up like pressure in a pipe. You don't even realize how close it is to bursting until the whole thing floods. That post, that one story, was my floodgate opening. And now, every person who ever brushed me off, who ever told me to be the bigger person, was watching me become someone they couldn't ignore. And I hadn't even said their names. That was the part that scared them most. The power of being anonymous and being right. At 11:47, my phone buzzed again. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me tap accept. A woman's voice came through, nervous, almost trembling. "Hi, is this Ryan? Who's this?" "My name's Emily. I'm Steve's daughter." I froze. Emily, his daughter from his first marriage, the one he barely talked about, the one he hadn't invited to Thanksgiving in years. "I saw the post," she said, "and I think we need to talk." And that's where things shifted, where the story stopped being just mine, where the past started to unravel faster than I ever expected. I sat there, stunned. I hadn't heard Emily's name in at least a decade. Uncle Steve never talked about her unless someone else brought her up, and even then, it was with this awkward mix of disdain and forced indifference. "She made her choices," he once said when I asked why she wasn't at Christmas. That was the whole explanation. No follow-up, no curiosity, just cold dismissal. But here she was, on the phone with me. "I didn't know if I should call," Emily continued, her voice low. "But when I saw the post, I knew it was you, the way you wrote it. I don't know, I just knew." I didn't know what to say. There was something haunting about hearing from her, like a ghost of family past suddenly stepping into the present. She hadn't just disappeared, she'd been erased. And yet, her voice sounded warm. Familiar, even. "I'm guessing you saw how fast it spread," I said finally, just to say something. She gave a short, sad laugh. "Yeah, I saw. It's blowing up. And I've been reading the comments all night. The whole thing just hit me. Hard." There was a pause. Not awkward, just heavy. "You know what really messed me up?" she said. "I thought I was the only one. That cracked something in me. I thought I admitted. And just like that, the wall I'd built up all day, anger, detachment, all of it, started to shift. Because for so long, I thought maybe it was me. That maybe I was too sensitive, too distant, too unwilling to let things go. That maybe I really didn't belong. But now here was someone else, cut from the same family tree, telling me she'd felt the same way. "Do you have time to talk?" she asked. "I don't want to dump all this on you, but there's stuff I've never said out loud before." I looked at the clock, midnight. I was supposed to be asleep. I had work in the morning, but none of that mattered. "Yeah," I said. "I've got time." So we talked. For hours. She told me about how Steve used to pit her against her mom, how he'd throw money at problems and then yank it away just to remind her who held the leash, how he'd tell everyone she was difficult, ungrateful, spoiled, when in reality, she'd just started asking questions he didn't want to answer. She talked about how when she turned 21, he cut her off completely and told the rest of the family she'd moved on. She hadn't. She just stopped fighting to be seen. And then she said something I'll never forget. "He taught me to believe that being silent was the price of keeping the peace. But it never bought me peace. It just made him comfortable." I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my upper lip. It was like everything I'd never said had found a voice in her. And it wasn't just about Steve. It was my mom brushing things under the rug, Jenna laughing along with the jokes, Kyle, my so-called best friend, joining them at that table like it was just another Thursday. It was years of being the outsider and pretending that was okay. Emily and I talked until nearly 3 a.m. And by the end of it, I felt lighter. Not healed. Far from it, but understood. Like someone had opened a locked door inside my chest and let fresh air in. Before we hung up, she said, "If you ever want help telling more of the truth, I'm in. Seriously, you're not alone in this." And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't going to end with one post. This was the beginning. I finally got a few hours of sleep, and when I woke up, everything had escalated. My inbox had exploded. Requests from journalists, offers from podcasts, someone from a documentary series asking if I'd speak on camera, anonymously, if I wanted. My name hadn't been leaked, but people were starting to put pieces together. Extended family members, old friends, acquaintances. Some reached out just to say, "I think I know who that was, and I believe you." Others weren't so kind. I got a text from Aunt Carol, Steve's wife, around noon. "Aunt Carol, you're ruining lives over one dinner, Ryan. Was that your plan? To humiliate everyone publicly? You were always dramatic." I stared at the message for a while. The gall of it. The projection. That's when I realized the real reason they were panicking. They weren't worried about the post being mean or inappropriate. They were worried it resonated. That people believed it. That strangers, thousands of them, recognized the kind of manipulation and cruelty they'd spent years disguising as family tradition. And in their world, image was everything. So I started pulling receipts. I wasn't planning to go public yet, but I began gathering screenshots, texts, voicemails, things I'd let slide, things I'd ignored to keep the peace. The time Jenna forwarded a family vacation invite to everyone but me. The message from Mom telling me not to make a scene at Christmas because Steve wasn't in the mood for attitude. The audio clip of Uncle Steve telling me at my college graduation dinner that graphic design isn't a real job. Piece by piece, I was building a timeline, a record, because this time, I wasn't going to let them twist the story. And that's when something happened that I didn't expect. A knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My apartment building had a buzzer, and I hadn't heard it go off. But there it was, 3 sharp knocks, right around 3:15 p.m. I froze. 1,000 possibilities flashed through my head. Another neighbor? A reporter? My landlord? Or one of them? I walked to the door slowly, heart pounding, and looked through the peephole. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was my mother, and she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, arms crossed, was Uncle Steve. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there, watching through the peephole as my mother fidgeted with the strap of her purse and Uncle Steve paced like a lion in a cage, all bottled up fury and fake restraint. The audacity of them showing up unannounced, after everything, after deciding I didn't exist on Thanksgiving, made my fingers curl into fists at my sides. But I wasn't going to give them the upper hand, not again. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, keeping the chain latched. "What do you want?" Mom's eyes widened like she hadn't expected me to sound so cold. "Ryan, sweetheart, can we come in? We just want to talk." Behind her, Steve snorted. "We wouldn't have to talk if you hadn't made that ridiculous post. You could have just picked up the phone." My voice stayed steady. You could have invited me. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. You know what? No, you're not coming in. Say whatever you need to say right here. Mom looked wounded. Ryan, please. Don't do this. This isn't you. I raised my eyebrows. Isn't me? You mean it's not the version of me you're used to? The one who smiles through everything and pretends it's all fine? Yeah, I'm done being that guy. Steve stepped forward, but I shut the door a bit tighter, so he couldn't even see my face clearly. We've been getting calls, Ryan, he said, his voice sharp. People are asking questions. My business partner saw the post. Carol's crying in the guest room. You've made us into a public spectacle. No, I said quietly. You did that. I just told the truth. Mom's voice cracked. Do you really think we did this to hurt you? You've always been so sensitive. We thought you didn't want to come this year. Steve said you'd mentioned something about being busy. I never said that. I cut in. None of you even asked. You assumed. Or worse, you lied. Because it was easier to pretend I didn't matter than to deal with the discomfort of inviting someone you all treat like a burden. They were both silent for a beat. Then Steve let out a sharp laugh. You're acting like some kind of martyr, he sneered. You're not the only person with problems, Ryan. Grow up. And that was it. That was the sentence that broke the last fragile thread of empathy I had left. I slammed the door shut, not hard, but with finality, and locked the deadbolt. I stood there for a moment, listening to them mutter on the other side. I heard Mom say something like, he's not thinking straight, and Steve curse under his breath before their footsteps faded. I didn't move. I just leaned against the door and breathed. Not long after, my phone buzzed again. Jenna this time. Jenna, what are you doing? Why is Mom sobbing? You need to fix this, Ryan. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because by then, the full ripple effect had already started. My post had crossed over from social media to news aggregators. A few journalists had picked it up and written anonymous op-eds about holiday exclusion and family dynamics. One even compared it to the concept of emotional scapegoating, how families often use one member as a dumping ground for their dysfunction, then act shocked when that person finally walks away. People were talking, and not just strangers. Over the next few days, I got more messages from extended family, cousins, great-aunts, even people I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Some just wrote short notes. I'm proud of you. Others sent paragraphs, telling me about their own versions of Thanksgiving betrayal. I even got a message from my dad's sister, who hadn't spoken to my mom in years. She wrote, I always thought you were different. I see now you were just surviving. That word, surviving, stuck with me, because that's what I'd been doing for years. Not living, not thriving. Just surviving in a family that only saw me as useful when I was quiet, helpful, non-confrontational. But now that I'd spoken up, really spoken up, they didn't know what to do with me. A week passed. I blocked Steve. I muted Jenna. I ignored Kyle's repeated texts, all variations of "Can we talk?" and "I didn't know, man." Because at that point, I didn't care whether they knew or didn't. It was too little, too late. But I didn't isolate myself. Emily and I stayed in touch. We met up for coffee a few days later, and it was surreal how quickly we clicked. We talked for 3 hours straight. She told me more about the family I'd never seen, about the subtle ways people like Steve twist the narrative, how they pit people against each other so no one compares notes. She even showed me old emails from Steve to her mom, full of threats and ultimatums. One line stood out to me more than any other. Ryan's heading down the same path. Soft. Weak. He won't make it unless someone straightens him out. I stared at those words for a long time. Because that wasn't just cruel. That was premeditated. He'd been preparing the rest of the family to believe the worst about me long before I'd even realized it. Gaslighting on a family-wide level. Undermining me in subtle ways so that by the time I ever pushed back, it would seem like I was the one overreacting. It wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. And now that I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name on the envelope. It was from Mom. I opened it slowly, expecting some manipulative guilt trip. But what I found was different. It was short, barely 2 paragraphs. But the tone was quieter. Not apologetic exactly, but reflective. She wrote, I read everything. I read the comments. I read what people said about mothers like me. At first, I was furious. But then I remembered your face when you were a boy. How you used to shrink when people raised their voices. How you learned to disappear into corners. I didn't protect you. I let others define you, and I stood by while it happened. I didn't think I was doing harm. But silence is a kind of harm, too. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know, I see it now. I'm sorry. I stared at that letter for a long time. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Not by itself. But it was something. And for the first time in years, it felt like someone in my family had actually seen me. Christmas came and went. I didn't go home. I spent it with Emily and a few friends who'd also chosen to step away from their families that year. We ate takeout, played board games, and watched cheesy movies on Netflix. No drama. No guilt. Just laughter and real connection. The kind I used to think only happened in movies. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't vindictive. It was just peaceful. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need their approval. I had truth on my side, and people who finally believed me. So when New Year's rolled around, I wrote something of my own. A follow-up post. No names, no accusations, just a reflection. I wrote about boundaries, about how families can love you and still hurt you, about how walking away doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're choosing yourself. The post didn't go viral like the first one, but that wasn't the point. It reached the people it needed to reach. It reached me. And I think, in a small way, it reached my mother too. Uncle Steve never contacted me again. Jenna eventually sent a real apology, a short one, but sincere. We're not close, but we're cordial now. Kyle and I talked once, and I told him I wished him well, but I didn't want to rebuild something I couldn't trust. And that was okay, because I had new traditions now. On Thanksgiving the next year, I hosted dinner. Small, quiet, full of laughter. Emily came. A few friends came. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody made jokes at someone else's expense. And when someone spilled cranberry sauce on the couch, we laughed and kept eating. No one was left outside the door. No one was told to go home. And as I looked around the room, I realized that's what family is supposed to feel like. I'm Caleb, 24 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my dad believed respect was earned only through control. Not kindness, not understanding, just dominance. He was the kind of guy who said things like, my roof, my rules, and meant it down to the letter. I lived with him and my younger brother Nathan in a weathered 2-story house in northern Michigan. Mom passed away when I was 17, and ever since, Dad had taken her absence as permission to crank up the authority. He wasn't physically abusive, but his words hit hard enough to bruise. You could never win with him. If I got an A, he'd ask why it wasn't an A+. If I got promoted at work, he'd say it was because my boss probably felt sorry for me. He wasn't always like that when Mom was around. But after she died, something in him calcified, like all his warmth died with her. For the past few years, I'd been working part-time at an IT firm while finishing my degree in cybersecurity. I paid rent, I helped with groceries, and I even handled the Wi-Fi and electric bills because Dad never bothered. I had access to the accounts, knew the logins, and set everything to auto-pay from my bank. It made things easier, and at the time, I thought I was just doing what needed to be done for the family. But to Dad, it didn't matter. If something went wrong, I was the first punching bag in line. If the sink leaked, it was my fault for not fixing it. If Nathan was acting out in school, it was because I was being a bad example. No matter how much I did, I was always the disappointment. Things came to a head one Tuesday night, about a month after I graduated. I had just come home from a long shift. Our servers had been down, and I'd stayed an extra 3 hours trying to patch the system. I walked in, exhausted, still in my work polo, and found Dad watching TV while the sink overflowed in the kitchen. Nathan was in his room blasting music, the dog hadn't been walked, and the trash was piled up to knee height. I sighed, dropped my bag, and went to clean the mess. That's when Dad snapped. "Don't you come in here acting all high and mighty," he barked. "You think because you got some little paper from college you're better than the rest of us?" I didn't say that. I replied, wiping up the water on the floor. "But this house is a mess, and no one else is doing anything." He stood up so fast the recliner nearly tipped. "You ungrateful brat. You're lucky I even let you live here. If you're so smart, then pay your own bills and live somewhere else." I stood still, soaked rag in my hand. The words hung in the air like frost. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I just nodded. "All right," I said quietly. "You got it." That night, I packed my things. Not everything, just the essentials: laptop, clothes, some childhood photos of Mom that I didn't trust to leave behind. I booked a cheap extended stay motel for a few days and called a coworker who had mentioned a spare room in her cousin's place. Within the week, I had my own space. Tiny, yes, but peaceful. I paid rent directly, bought my own groceries, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without walking on eggshells. I didn't hear from Dad after I left. Not once. He didn't call to ask where I went, didn't text to check if I was alive. Nathan reached out once, vaguely, just asking if I had any spare money for a new Xbox controller. I told him no, and that was that. I figured they'd moved on. I wasn't part of the picture anymore. Then, for weeks later, I got a call while I was at work. I recognized the number. It was the landline back home. For a moment, my stomach twisted. I thought something had happened to Nathan. I picked up. "Hello. Caleb," Dad said, voice sharp and urgent. "What did you do?" I blinked. "Excuse me. The power's off. The internet's down. Everything's out. What is going on?" I sat back in my chair, stunned for a second before it clicked. The electric bill, the Wi-Fi, the auto payments. They were all still in my name, and I had pulled my bank account from them the day I left. I hadn't thought much of it. I assumed Dad would take over, or at least notice when the bills didn't go through. "I'm not paying for your house anymore," I said evenly. "You told me to pay my own bills and live somewhere else." So I did. There was silence on the other end. A beat, maybe two, and then, "You seriously left us in the dark?" I smiled, not out of pettiness, but from relief. "You seriously thought I'd keep paying your bills after you told me to get out?" "You little," he caught himself. "You know Nathan's in school. He needs the internet. And what about the fridge, the heating?" I cut him off. "You're the parent, remember? Figure it out." He hung up on me. I didn't hear from him again for 3 days. Then a text popped up from Nathan. "Thanks a lot. I had to do my homework at McDonald's." I didn't reply. What happened after that started to ripple further than I expected. That's where the real fallout began. Not just lights going off, but something much bigger unraveling. And it all started when Dad tried to reconnect the power, only to find out the account wasn't just under my name. It was under something much more permanent. The thing is, when I had first set up those utilities years ago, Dad hadn't wanted to deal with that kind of nonsense. I was 18 and had just started working part-time, and when I told him the internet was getting shut off due to unpaid bills, he tossed me his credit card and told me to figure it out. So I did. I made the calls, paid the fees, and set up new accounts under my name. Same for the electricity a few months later when we got a notice taped to the front door. Every time something went wrong, I'd quietly fix it, thinking I was just being responsible. Over the years, the account stayed in my name, and Dad never once asked or cared. Why would he? The lights stayed on. The Wi-Fi worked. He had power, control, and convenience, all without lifting a finger. But now, the power company wouldn't talk to him. Neither would the internet provider. They kept telling him, "Sorry, sir, we can't discuss this account unless we speak to the account holder." And that account holder was me. 3 days after the initial call, I got a second one, this time from a blocked number. I knew it was him, so I didn't answer. But the voicemail he left, I listened to it 3 times. His voice was strained, angry, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Desperation. "Caleb," he said, "I don't know what point you're trying to make, but your brother's got finals this week. And I got food spoiling in the fridge. Just call me back. We need to talk." I didn't call back. Instead, I texted him one line, "Pay your own bills. You said it yourself." That was the first time I'd ever used his own words against him. And it felt strange. Not good. Not bad. Just strange. Because I wasn't trying to get revenge. Not yet, anyway. I just didn't want to be used anymore. But part of me couldn't help thinking about all the nights I sat at that kitchen table, quietly transferring my own money to keep the house running while he barked insults from the other room. The time he tossed a plate across the room because I used his eggs to make breakfast. The week he grounded me at 21 for disrespect because I told him I had a job interview in another state. But I wasn't grounded anymore. I was out. Later that week, I got a text from Nathan. Just a picture. A dark living room lit by candles, a space heater on the floor, and our dog curled up in a blanket. Under it, he wrote, "You win." That stung more than I expected. I didn't reply, but I stared at that image for a long time. I felt guilty, not for leaving, but for dragging my little brother into the fallout. He wasn't a saint. He ignored most chores and treated me like an overqualified butler, but he was still a kid. 17, nearly 18, but still. He didn't deserve the cold or the chaos. That night, I sent him a $50 Visa e-gift card with a message. Get some hot food. This isn't about you. The next day, I got an email from the power company. Request for account change denied. Proof of ownership required. Apparently, Dad had tried to get the account switched over and failed. The address was tied to my account, and since I'd set it up years ago with a lease agreement, technically forged since Dad never wrote one, they needed documentation that he was the property owner. But the thing is, he wasn't. I was. See, what Dad never knew, what Mom had quietly arranged before her passing, was that the house had been willed jointly to both of us, me and Nathan. When she died, the paperwork got stalled in probate, and Dad brushed it off, saying it didn't matter because it's all ours anyway. But 2 years ago, I finally followed through with the legal process. I paid the lawyer fees, filed the claim, and received official notice that the property was now under my and Nathan's names. Mom's final act of quiet rebellion. I didn't tell Dad. I didn't need to. I had no plans to use it against him until he forced me out. And now? Well, now the utilities weren't the only thing under my control. A week after the lights went out, Dad showed up at my new place. Not screaming, not shouting, just standing at the edge of the driveway in his faded leather jacket, shoulders hunched, as if gravity had finally caught up to him. I didn't open the door. I just watched through the blinds. He stayed there for 10 minutes, then turned around and walked away. That night, I got another call. This time, he didn't yell. I was wrong, Caleb, he said. You're not a burden. You're not useless. You kept this family together longer than I ever realized. He paused, like he was waiting for me to jump in. I didn't. I need your help, he continued. Just for a little while. I'll pay you back. I swear. I didn't know the house was in your name. I didn't know you could do that. That's when it hit me. He didn't call to apologize. He called because he realized I held the reins. I didn't respond that night, but I started thinking. If he wanted power back on, if he wanted access, then maybe it was time to teach him that control could be taken away just as easily as it was enforced. Not out of spite, but to restore balance, to remind him that respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned. And so, the real plan began. Because turning off the lights? That was just the beginning. After that phone call, I didn't speak to Dad for days. I was quiet, calculated. I didn't want to move emotionally. I wanted to move smart. I started combing through the documents Mom left behind. I already had the deed showing me and Nathan as co-owners, but there was more. Bank statements, life insurance policy copies, even an old letter she'd handwritten but never sent. A letter addressed to me. It wasn't dramatic or long. It just said, I know your father, and I know one day he will test your strength. Be kind, but not weak. That one line stuck with me. I didn't want revenge in the way movies made it seem. Fireworks, dramatic speeches, door-slamming power moves. I wanted something quieter, something that would remind him who had been holding things together all along. I began by formally transferring all utility services to inactive status. I didn't cancel them. I simply requested each to be paused due to ownership dispute and tenant removal. That process sent a legal notice to the address, warning of possible repossession of service due to account disputes. Dad tried calling again, 5 times, left 2 voicemails. The last one was him, quieter this time, asking me to come by and talk face to face. I ignored it. Then the twist happened. Nathan showed up at my new place. It was late, around 9 p.m., and I'd just come back from work. I saw his silhouette through the window, his hoodie soaked from the rain. I opened the door, and he just stood there for a moment before blurting out, "He's trying to sell the house." I blinked. "What?" He said he called a realtor. He's planning to cash out and move to Florida. Said he's tired of the cold. Said he's earned it. The fury that rushed up through my chest nearly made me dizzy. I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. "He can't sell it," I said. "He doesn't own it." "I know," Nathan replied. "But he doesn't care. He's going to try anyway." Said he can forge a signature and that nobody's going to double-check some small-town paperwork. That's when I knew Dad had crossed a line. It wasn't just pride or anger anymore. It was theft. He was planning to illegally sell a home that didn't fully belong to him and take every penny. No discussion, no care that Nathan, his own son, would be left homeless, and certainly no intent to repay anything he owed me. I thanked Nathan, gave him a towel and something hot to drink, and sat with him in silence. It was the first time in years we'd just talked. No tension, no background insults from Dad. Just two brothers, finally seeing things clearly. He apologized for how he used to act, how he'd ignored me, let Dad walk all over me, and called me uptight when I tried to keep things from falling apart. You were the adult, he said, when the actual adult stopped being one. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up gathering every document, deed copies, utilities, proof of ownership, even screenshots of every bill I'd paid in the last 4 years. Then I wrote an email to our family lawyer, the same one who helped me with the deed transfer 2 years ago. The next morning, I dropped off a hard copy packet at his office. 2 days later, Dad got served an official cease and desist order, barring him from attempting to sell, rent, or claim financial ownership of the property. It was hand-delivered to him in front of his house, where he was standing with a real estate agent on the porch. Nathan told me he looked like someone had punched the air out of him. But that wasn't the betrayal. That came a few days later, when I showed up unannounced at the house, holding the same folder, and found Dad sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, a single candle flickering beside an old mug. He looked up at me, eyes tired. You came. I said nothing. I sat across from him and laid the documents out one by one. This is the deed, I said, tapping the page. You don't own the house. He swallowed. This is your utility history. You haven't paid a dime in years. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand to stop him. This is proof of attempted fraud. You tried to sell a house you don't own, and I have the voicemail you left Nathan where you admitted it. So if I wanted to press charges. He sat perfectly still. I could. I let the words hang. Then I leaned back, watching him shrink under the weight of it. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, I didn't think you'd go this far. I smiled faintly. Neither did I. But here we are. His voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. What do you want from me, Caleb? Do you want me to say I'm sorry? That I was a terrible father? No, I said, standing. I want you to understand that the person you thought was weak was the one keeping your entire life from collapsing. And I left. But it wasn't over yet. Because 3 days later, I got a text from my uncle, the one who lived 2 towns over and who Dad had always bragged to about keeping the house in order. The text just said, "Call me. You're not going to believe what your dad told me." That's when I realized Dad had started spinning a new narrative, and I wasn't about to let that slide. I called my uncle that night. He picked up fast, like he'd been waiting. "Hey, Caleb," he said, voice cautious. "I didn't know what to believe at first, but after everything you've done for your dad over the years, I figured you deserve to know what he's been saying." I braced myself. "Go ahead." He told the family you hacked into his accounts, that you stole the house, that you froze the electricity out of spite because he refused to co-sign your car loan. I let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. He kept going. "He's already called Aunt Leslie and Grandpa Dale. Told them you've been unstable since your mom passed, that you're trying to punish the whole family because you never dealt with her death. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. I thanked him and hung up, then sat in my car for a long while, staring at the steering wheel. My knuckles tightened around it. This wasn't just some exaggerated story to save face. This was character assassination. This was him reaching into the only place I hadn't touched yet, our extended family, and poisoning the well. And maybe, if I hadn't already spent years cleaning up his messes, I would have second-guessed myself. But I didn't. I knew the truth. And now, it was time to face it. I fell into a routine after that. Go to work. Keep quiet. Stay focused. But every night, something in me grew colder. Not bitter. Not even angry. Just resolved. I stopped expecting an apology. I stopped hoping he'd realize what he'd done. And slowly, I started to prepare for life without him in it at all. One night, about a week later, Nathan called. He sounded weirdly formal, which wasn't like him. "Hey," he said. "So, Dad's been telling people he kicked you out." I closed my eyes. "Yeah, I heard. He told my guidance counselor at school. Said you were ungrateful, that you took advantage of him, and then ghosted. Now everyone thinks he's some kind of saint raising me all on his own." I could hear the conflict in his voice, part disbelief, part shame, part boiling frustration. "Do you believe him?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. "No," he said. "Not anymore." And that meant more to me than anything. Not the deed. Not the house. Just hearing my little brother finally see through the mask. But things got worse before they got better. That weekend, I stopped by the house one last time, intending to grab a few boxes I'd left in the attic, old yearbooks, photo albums, stuff that didn't matter to Dad but meant the world to me. He was sitting outside on the porch, hunched over with a beer in one hand and a pack of unpaid bills in the other. When he saw me, he didn't say anything. I walked past him, into the house that once felt like a minefield and now felt like a forgotten museum. The air was stale, and the lights were dim, powered by a generator, judging by the noise out back. The fridge was off. Most of the furniture was gone. I realized, with a pang, that he'd started pawning things. Probably to keep up appearances. The attic was cold. Dust coated everything. I grabbed the boxes, but as I was heading back down, something caught my eye wedged between two beams, a plastic container covered in soot. Inside was a collection of letters. Dozens of them. All in Mom's handwriting. They weren't addressed to anyone. Just thoughts, fears, updates. As if she'd been writing to herself in secret. A form of journaling. The last one was dated just 2 months before she passed. I'm worried about Caleb. He's already carrying too much. Every time something breaks, Stephen yells at him like he's the man of the house. But he's still just a boy. My sweet, quiet boy. I hope one day he leaves this place. I hope he builds something for himself. I sat there, holding the letter in the dark, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not because of Dad. Because of her. She saw it. She knew. And I never even got to tell her that I did exactly what she hoped I would. I left. I built a life. I stopped waiting for permission to matter. I took the box and left the attic. As I passed through the kitchen, Dad looked up from his seat and said nothing. Just watch me go. But the next morning, I got another call. This one from the bank. Apparently, Dad had attempted to take out a loan against the house. Again. Only this time, he forged my signature. That was it. That was the moment. I had been quiet. I had been fair. I had been generous, even when he didn't deserve it. But he crossed the line. And now, I was done being quiet. The forged loan application was the final straw. I met with the bank manager in person the next day, bringing the deed, my ID, and copies of the signature Dad had faked. The second the manager compared them, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "This is bad," he said. He submitted a forged co-owner signature to secure a private loan for $30,000. That's criminal. I already knew that. I didn't need the manager to tell me how serious it was. But I also knew I didn't want to see my father behind bars. Not yet. I didn't want this to turn into another bitter headline or court drama. I just wanted the game to be over. I wanted my name, my credit, and my life out from under his thumb. The manager offered to escalate things to the legal department. I nodded and told him to proceed, but to wait on contacting authorities. I had something else in mind first. I spent the next week making quiet, strategic moves. First, I transferred full operational control of the house into a newly formed property management LLC I created under my name. Nathan agreed to sign off as co-owner, which gave me complete authority to lease, renovate, or even sell the house without needing Dad's input. That move locked Dad out of any financial maneuvering going forward. Next, I met with the same lawyer who had helped with the deed transfer and walked him through the forged loan attempt. He was livid on my behalf and promised to prepare a cease and desist order so ironclad it would make Dad regret ever holding a pen. I also called the utility companies, again, and officially declared the residence unoccupied. That triggered an inspection, which, once completed, would allow me to disconnect all services completely, permanently. But my final move was the one that truly set everything in motion. I filed a notice of eviction. Not immediately. Nathan and I agreed to give Dad 60 days to vacate, just enough to comply with the law, just enough to avoid any retaliatory nonsense. But the papers were real. Signed, filed, and taped to the front door 2 days later by a process server. And that's when the silence started. Dad didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't show up at my place, or even yell at Nathan. He just disappeared inside the house. Nathan, still living with him temporarily, told me Dad barely spoke for the first week. He sat at the kitchen table most of the day, chain-smoking, muttering things to himself, flipping through old bills like they were maps to buried treasure. The power went out for good on a Thursday. Nathan sent me a photo of the dark house and one word: done. I took a deep breath and exhaled the years of buried frustration. For the first time in my adult life, I felt in control, not because I'd won something, but because I'd finally reclaimed something. Myself. In the weeks that followed, things moved quickly. Nathan stayed with me while finishing school, and then moved into a small apartment using the savings I helped him set aside. He finally applied to colleges, something he'd avoided out of fear Dad would sabotage it. I co-signed for him, not because he asked, but because I trusted him. And me? I got promoted. The IT firm I worked for offered me a full-time cybersecurity role with a team under me. I started therapy, real therapy, for the first time ever. Unpacked the grief I never got to process. Mom's death, Dad's resentment, my years of silence. All of it. One evening, after work, I opened one of Mom's old journals again and found a line I hadn't noticed before. Scribbled in the margins of a page was a small note. If they don't see your worth, it doesn't mean you don't have any. It just means their eyes are broken. I closed the journal and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The eviction date was approaching. I hadn't heard from Dad since the notice. No begging, no bargaining, no threats, just silence. Until, 5 days before the deadline, I received a letter in the mail. A real, physical letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was from him. Inside was a folded piece of paper, creased and shaky with age. It wasn't long. Just a single paragraph written in pen. The words uneven and dark where the pen had pressed too hard. I don't know who I am without control, and I'm scared you finally saw through me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. But I'm not going to fight the eviction. I'm going to leave. I never deserved the house anyway. I know that now. No signature. No return address. Just a letter that felt hollow, like an apology wrapped in cowardice. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even respond. I just folded the letter and tucked it into the last of Mom's journals. And 5 days later, I drove by the house one final time. The porch was empty. The blinds were drawn. A U-Haul truck sat quietly in the driveway, already packed and ready to go. He was gone, but something in me knew. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Because what came next, the fallout, would shake more than just him. 3 days after Dad moved out, I officially stepped onto the property. Not as a tenant, not as a guest, but as its legal co-owner and manager. It was like walking into a ghost of my childhood. The smell hit me first, stale cigarettes, sour food, and something underneath it all, like rot. The walls were yellowed, the living room carpet stained with who knows what. The couch was gone, probably sold for scraps. A few battered chairs sat in its place, as if still clinging to the idea of being useful. But the worst part? The silence. Not peaceful. Not calm, just empty. I walked through the room slowly, taking stock of the damage. Broken cabinet doors. Holes punched into the drywall, likely from one of Dad's moods. The bathroom mirror was cracked, and the toilet had been left in such a state I had to open a window just to breathe. Nathan had told me it was bad, but I hadn't expected this. It wasn't just physical neglect. It was spite. He hadn't just lived here after I left. He'd ruined it. I took pictures. Every room. Every scratch, stain, and gash. I filed a claim with the property insurance company and forwarded a copy to my lawyer. But even that wasn't the real setup. No, what came next would hit deeper. Because Dad may have left the house, but he hadn't stopped spreading lies. Over the following week, I started getting calls from relatives again. Some polite, some confrontational, all confused. My cousin Stephanie asked why I'd evicted our uncle when he was just trying to keep the family together. My aunt demanded to know why Dad was sleeping in a truck. And one voicemail from Grandpa Dale actually started with, "I thought you were better than this, Caleb." That's when I realized he hadn't just played the victim. He was spinning a narrative. One where he was the noble single father, betrayed by his selfish son. Where I was the overeducated, emotionally unstable snake who kicked him out of his own home out of jealousy or greed. And they believed him because they didn't know me. They hadn't seen the quiet sacrifices, the 4 years of paying bills out of my own pocket, the nights I worked 2 jobs while Dad slept on the couch, the phone calls I made to the power company, the internet company, the water department, the dinners I skipped to make sure Nathan had lunch money. But I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain. I was going to show them. I began by gathering the evidence. Quietly, carefully. I printed every bill paid in my name, dating back 4 years. I compiled screenshots of payments, dates, auto drafts. I added the letter Mom wrote, the deed signed in my and Nathan's names, the cease and desist notices, the forged loan application with proof of fraud. And then I built a folder, digital and physical, titled The Truth. But I wasn't going to send it around like some petty mass email. I had something better in mind. It started with Grandpa Dale. He was hosting a family dinner for his 80th birthday, one of those big events where all the uncles and cousins show up from across the state. It was going to be catered, photographed, and shared across everyone's social media like it was the royal wedding. And Dad, of course, was going to be there, probably planning to parade around in his nicest shirt, pretending he was the tragic patriarch cast aside by his ungrateful son. So I called Grandpa directly. He was cold at first, distant. "I don't want to get in the middle of this, Caleb." "You already are," I replied. "But I'm not calling to argue. I'm calling to RSVP." That surprised him. You want to come?" "I do," I said. "And I'd like to say a few words. Just a short thank you toast for everything the family's done for me. Nothing dramatic." He hesitated. "I don't want a scene." "You won't get one," I promised. "Just the truth." He agreed. The night of the dinner, I wore my best suit. Nathan came with me. I could tell he was nervous, and frankly, so was I. Not because I doubted what I was about to do, but because I knew it would burn bridges I could never rebuild. The dinner was held at a fancy banquet hall. Crystal glasses, linen napkins. The whole extended family was there, dressed to the nines. Dad was already seated near the front, looking smug in a gray blazer I hadn't seen in years. He spotted me and Nathan and did a double take, but said nothing. The dinner began. Toasts were made. People laughed, clinked glasses, shared old stories. And then Grandpa stood up and tapped his spoon against his wine glass. "I'd like to invite my grandson Caleb to say a few words." The room quieted. I stood, walked slowly to the front, and took the mic. My hands didn't shake. "Thank you, Grandpa. And thank you to everyone here for being part of this family. I know we don't always see each other often, but I've always respected the legacy this family holds. Hard work, loyalty, and truth." I paused, scanning the room. My eyes landed on Dad. But sometimes, the truth gets lost in the stories we tell ourselves. And when that happens, people get hurt. Real stories get buried under pride and ego. I held up the folder titled The Truth. In this folder is the full history of what's been happening the last 5 years. Every bill paid, every lie told, every document proving who owned the house, who forged signatures, and who tried to rewrite the past. A murmur spread through the crowd. Dad froze. "I won't read it out loud. I won't humiliate anyone. But I've made copies. And if any of you want to know the truth, not the version you heard through whispers, then come find me after dinner. I'll be standing right over there." I stepped down, returned to my seat, and for the first time in my life, felt taller than my father. He didn't say a word, but others did. One by one, after dessert, relatives approached me quietly. Some just took a folder. Others stayed to talk. A few even apologized. And as I turned to leave that night, I caught a glimpse of Dad, still seated alone at the front table, shoulders hunched, lips pressed into a thin line. His mask had cracked, but his fall, that was still coming. After the birthday dinner, everything shifted. The silence from the family ended, not with outrage, but with whispers. Some relatives distanced themselves from Dad immediately, having seen the evidence for themselves. Others stayed quiet but stopped echoing his version of the story. A few even reached out to me privately, some apologizing, others just saying they didn't know. I wasn't looking for validation, but it still felt good to be seen. I had spent so many years doing the invisible work, keeping things running, holding things together, and now, finally, the truth had shape. It had weight. It had witnesses. But Dad? He doubled down. First, he tried the guilt angle. I got a letter in the mail, another one. This time he didn't pretend to apologize. He went straight for manipulation. "You've turned my own family against me. Do you feel powerful now? You're not a hero, Caleb. You're just bitter." I didn't reply. Then came the smear campaign. He posted vague rants on Facebook, tagging no one, but making it obvious. Calling people snakes, talking about how entitlement ruined his family, how some people don't understand loyalty. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to, but I kept receipts. Because the more he pushed, the clearer his pattern became. Accuse, deflect, play victim. Until finally, he made a mistake. He tried to sue me. I got a legal notice claiming wrongful eviction, emotional distress, and an outlandish demand for $50,000 in damages. It was laughable on the surface, poorly written, full of errors, citing laws that didn't even apply to our state. But it was filed, and that meant I had to respond. So I did, with a counterclaim. But not just to defend myself. To end this, my lawyer and I prepared a formal countersuit for property damage, attempted fraud, forgery, and slander. We included notarized statements from Nathan, bank records, utility records, and even screenshots of Dad's Facebook rants as part of the slander claim. When the court date arrived, Dad showed up in an oversized suit and a sneer. He didn't have a lawyer, just a thick folder of half-organized papers and a chip on his shoulder. But what he didn't have was a case. The judge read our documents, listened to both sides, watched as I calmly laid out a timeline, showed photos, handed over copies of receipts, statements, voice recordings, even the letter from the power company declining to transfer service due to ownership restrictions. He barely looked at Dad, just kept flipping pages, occasionally raising an eyebrow. Then he said something I'll never forget. I see a pattern of neglect, abuse of authority, and attempted fraud. I don't just find in the defendant's favor. I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office. Dad's jaw clenched. He's lying. This is a personal attack. But the gavel had already come down. Case dismissed. Counterclaim sustained. The court awarded me $12,400 in damages, just a fraction of what he cost me over the years, but that wasn't the point. The real victory? The referral for criminal investigation. That meant subpoenas. That meant scrutiny. That meant consequences. And those consequences hit fast. Within 2 weeks, Dad's attempt to secure another loan through a payday lender was flagged. His name popped up on a fraud watch list. The real estate agent he'd contacted before filed a formal complaint, citing his attempt to use forged documents. His landlord, yes, the guy who had rented him a small apartment after the eviction, called Nathan to say Dad had missed 2 rent payments and was not the person he claimed to be. The facade was collapsing, but I didn't celebrate. Because revenge isn't about fireworks. It's about balance. It's about the quiet moment when you no longer flinch at your father's name. It's when you stop carrying the weight he placed on you as a child. It's when you walk into your own house, keys in hand, lights on, peace in your chest, and you realize he can't reach you anymore. Not with words, not with lies, not with guilt, not ever again. But there was still one last thing I needed to do before I could close this chapter for good. And it involved a letter, one my mother never finished, and one I was finally ready to answer. After the court ruling and the fallout that followed, life settled in a way it never had before. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving, I was living. The house was finally quiet, but not empty. I renovated it room by room, painting over the nicotine-stained walls, replacing broken fixtures, installing new floors. Every repair felt like an act of reclaiming, not just of the property, but of myself. Nathan helped where he could on weekends. We joked, ordered pizza, put on music Mom used to love while we worked. It was healing in the purest form, messy, real, earned. The criminal referral never turned into a full trial. Dad took a plea deal for the forgery charges, avoided jail, but had to pay fines, attend mandatory financial ethics counseling, and was barred from applying for new loans for 2 years. The damage was done, though. His reputation, what little was left, was shot. The family had seen the truth. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I didn't send him one of the folders titled The Truth. I didn't need to. He moved out of state soon after. Arizona, I think. Some distant cousin mentioned it during a holiday Zoom call I skipped. Apparently, he's renting a small room above a garage from a friend. No car. No stable income. Just a man left alone with his stories. The ones no one listens to anymore. As for me, I got a new job offer, bigger company, better pay, a relocation package if I ever wanted to leave Michigan. I turned it down. For now. Because here, this place, it was finally mine. One evening, I sat in the attic where I'd first found her letters. I held the last one. Mom's quiet fear that I'd be buried by the weight of a man who never knew how to lift others. I read it one final time, then flipped it over and wrote on the back. You were right, Mom. He tested me, and I walked away stronger. Thank you for seeing me. I placed the letter back in the container and sealed it with a new lid. Then I tucked it high in the rafters, where someday, maybe, someone else would find it and know the truth didn't disappear. It lived here, in these walls, in this piece. And then, just as I stood to leave, I noticed something tucked between 2 old beams, a scrap of paper I hadn't seen before. Wrinkled, torn, faded from time. It was Dad's handwriting. A grocery list. A stupid, simple list from years ago. milk, bread, dog food. At the bottom, one line had been added in a scribble so faint I almost missed it. Tell Caleb I'm proud of him someday. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it once and let it drop into the trash bin with the rest of the broken pieces. Because someday never came, and I don't need his pride to stand tall anymore. I've got my own, and I built it from scratch. It was the first Monday in May when everything changed. I remember because I had just finished wiping the dust off the last windowsill in my apartment, set down the rag, and finally let myself breathe. My name's Brandon, I'm 26, and for the first time in my life, I had something that was mine. Not rented with 3 roommates, not crashing at my cousin's place while trying to make ends meet. My apartment, my name on the lease, my blood, sweat, and a whole lot of late-night YouTube tutorials in the fresh white paint on the walls. And I wasn't even trying to be fancy. I just wanted something clean, something mine. I had spent the last 4 months pulling double shifts, working weekends, skipping dinners, and pretty much ghosting my social life just to be able to close on this one-bedroom place a few miles outside the city. It was small, older, and needed work, but it was quiet. And it was mine. Did I mention that already? I probably did. Because you don't forget the first time you put your hand on your own doorknob, turn the key, and know there's no one on the other side but you. But let me back up. You need to understand the family dynamic first, otherwise what happened won't make sense. Or maybe it'll make too much sense. I grew up in a house where the loudest person got their way. My dad wasn't in the picture. He left when I was in middle school and barely looked back. So it was just me, my older sister Emily, and our mom, who somehow decided Emily was the second coming of Cinderella, except instead of doing chores, Emily got excuses. Always. Every bad grade, every tantrum, every breakup. She's sensitive, Mom would whisper. She's going through a phase. For 15 years straight. Emily was 5 years older than me and had the confidence of someone who never got told no. I used to think she was cool when I was a kid. She wore makeup and always smelled like vanilla perfume and blasted music in her car like she was in a movie. But once I hit high school, something shifted. She started talking to me like I was her annoying little servant. Bran, grab me a soda. Bran, do the dishes, or I'll tell Mom you scratched her car. Bran, don't be such a weirdo. When I told my mom, she'd say the same thing every time. Just let her be. She's under a lot of pressure. I never figured out what the pressure was, exactly. She dropped out of college halfway through her first semester, spent a few years hopping from one temp job to another, then married a guy named Rick who wore sunglasses indoors and thought sarcasm was a personality. Meanwhile, I was the one who stayed quiet. I did well in school, got into a decent community college, and took night classes while working full-time at a logistics warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid, and over time I moved up from unloading trucks to team lead. Nobody gave me anything. I clawed for every promotion, every dollar, every inch of progress. I was used to hearing no and turning it into watch me. That's probably why Emily hated it when I bought the apartment. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't throw a party or post it all over social media, but I did bring it up over dinner at Mom's one Sunday. She was microwaving something while Emily scrolled on her phone, and I casually said, I close on my place this Friday. Finally, Emily didn't even look up. Didn't think you could afford anything with those wages. I didn't reply. I just smiled. Mom, to her credit, said, That's wonderful, Brandon. I'm so proud of you. But her eyes flicked toward Emily like she was worried how she'd take it. Emily let out this half laugh, half snort, and said, Well, I hope you like plumbing problems and loud neighbors. You know how those starter places are. That was her way. Anything good happening to someone else was an attack on her. And when things got worse with Rick, when the fights became louder, and then suddenly stopped because Rick was gone, Emily's bitterness grew teeth. She moved back in with Mom for a few weeks, which everyone knew would be months. She took over the living room, spread her stuff across the floor like she owned the place, and started making these pointed comments about how some people didn't understand how hard life could get. I stayed out of it. I had my place to focus on. I spent weekends sanding the floors, painting cabinets, installing new light fixtures that didn't flicker like horror movie props. I even learned how to tile my own bathroom. By the end of April, I was done. It looked perfect. Maybe not by magazine standards, but to me, perfect. And then came that Monday. It was one of those weirdly hot days in early May. I had just finished a shift, my shirt stuck to my back, and all I could think about was taking a long shower and sitting on the balcony with a glass of iced tea. I walked up to the door, stuck my key in the lock, and it didn't turn. I blinked. Tried again. Maybe I was holding it wrong, or tired. I checked the key. My key. I turned it again. Nothing. My heart did this little tap dance against my ribs. Maybe the lock was jammed. Maybe someone messed with it. I jiggled the key, then pressed my ear against the door like some kind of detective, and that's when I heard it. A voice. A woman's voice. Familiar. Laughing. I froze. Then knocked. The laughter stopped. A few seconds later, the door opened a crack. Just a few inches. And standing there, in one of my t-shirts, was Emily. She looked like she'd just woken up from a nap. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she was holding a bowl of cereal. My cereal. What are you doing here? She asked, like I was the intruder. I stared at her. What are you doing here? Why doesn't my key work? Oh, she said casually, stepping back. Mom had the locks changed. We moved in last week. We? My voice sounded thin. Me and Jamie, she said, waving vaguely toward the bedroom. My son? You know, the one you barely see? It's been a hard time for him, Brandon. Emily, this is my apartment. She gave me this look, like I'd just told her the earth was flat. You're young. You'll bounce back. Jamie needs stability right now. I didn't even register half of what she said. My eyes were scanning the room. My rug. My coffee table. My books stacked on the shelves. It was all still there, except now with toy cars scattered across the floor, dirty bowls in the sink, laundry draped over the couch. I think I stopped breathing. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't even step inside. I turned, walked back down the stairs, got in my car, and sat in silence for a good 10 minutes, just gripping the steering wheel. My chest felt like it was caving in, like the air had been sucked out of the world. Then I pulled out my phone and called my mom. She answered on the second ring. Hey, sweetie. Why is Emily in my apartment? She sighed. Not guilty. Not panicked. Just tired. Brandon, please don't make a scene. Emily's going through a really difficult time. You gave her my apartment? You're young. You'll find something else. It's just temporary, until she gets back on her feet. Jamie needs a stable home. And you? Well, you're always working anyway. I felt something snap. Not loud, not explosive. Just a quiet crack. I said, okay, and hung up. Then I drove straight to the police station. Not to start a fight. Not to scream. But with my lease in hand. And that's when the real war began. I walked into that police station like I was still in a dream. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a pat on the back. Maybe some officer to say, oh wow, let's go kick her out right now. But what I got was paperwork. Protocol. Cautious nods and hesitant tones. I sat in the waiting area, lease in one hand, ID in the other, trying to stay calm while my brain screamed in circles. The officer at the front desk, Officer Marks, I think his name was, asked me to explain everything. I did. Slowly. Carefully. No anger in my voice. Just the facts. I had signed a lease 3 months ago. I had paid for every bit of that apartment myself. I had keys, furniture, receipts. And now I was locked out, with someone else living there. Someone who hadn't paid a cent and had no legal right to be there. He looked through the lease, asked for my landlord's contact info, then gave me a look that felt somewhere between sympathetic and exhausted. Well, he said, this isn't a criminal matter. Yet. If she broke in or changed the locks without permission, we might be looking at trespassing. But since you gave her a key, I didn't, I interrupted. I never gave her a key. I gave one spare to my mom for emergencies. That's it. He raised his eyebrows, slowly nodding. All right, that changes things. Your mom gave access to someone else. That's unauthorized use, maybe even unlawful entry. But look, Brandon, this kind of situation can get messy. Family disputes don't always get solved through us. You'll want to start with a formal report, then go through your landlord. They'll likely need to file an eviction notice if she won't leave willingly. I wanted to laugh, or cry, or scream into a pillow. Instead, I just asked for the forms and started filling them out with a numb hand. My phone buzzed with a text halfway through. I ignored it. It was from my mom. Please don't make this worse, Brandon. She needs this more than you right now. That line stuck with me the rest of the night. I crashed at a friend's place after that. Darren, a guy I used to work with who had a couch and no questions. He offered me a beer and a pillow. I took both. Didn't sleep. Just stared at the ceiling, thinking about how fast everything had unraveled. The next morning, I called my landlord, Mr. Rios. He was as shocked as I was. "She's what?" he said, voice going sharp. "You mean someone changed the locks? That's illegal, Brandon. I never authorized that." "I didn't either. I wasn't even told. My mom just gave her access." There was a pause. "She's not on the lease. I can start the eviction process, but that'll take time. Court notice, sheriff posting, minimum 30 days unless she leaves voluntarily." 30 days. 30 days of her living in my home, touching my things, eating my food, sleeping in my bed. My stomach twisted. Mr. Rios promised to come by and verify everything in person, but until then, I was stuck in limbo. My apartment wasn't mine anymore, not in practice. I called my mom again that afternoon. She picked up, soft and slow, like she'd been waiting for it. "Hi, honey. I want you to tell me exactly what happened." She sighed. "Brandon, I know you're upset, but try to understand." Emily showed up crying, with Jamie in her arms. She said Rick kicked her out, that she had nowhere to go, and I couldn't stand to see my grandson suffer. "You're doing fine, sweetie. You're strong. You have a good job. And that means you can just give away my apartment? You weren't even there half the time. You're always working or sleeping at friends' places. I didn't think it would be a big deal for a few weeks." I gripped the phone tighter. "You didn't think to ask me? She's your sister, Brandon. Family helps family, and she needs this more than you." There it was again. That phrase. She needs this more than you. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "You're right." Just a quiet, patronizing dismissal. "I'm coming by tomorrow," I said. "Get her out. You're not thinking clearly. Don't do something you'll regret." No apology. No accountability. Just another excuse. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. The next day, I pulled into the driveway with Mr. Rios right behind me. He wanted to witness everything himself. We knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Nothing. Finally, he used the master key he still had. But it didn't work. The locks had been fully changed. Mr. Rios stepped back, rubbing his forehead. Unbelievable. We had no choice but to post a notice on the door, an official warning that the tenant of record, me, had reported unauthorized occupancy and that legal eviction proceedings had begun. I took a picture of the notice and sent it to both Emily and my mom. Neither replied. But later that night, I saw the paper crumpled in a trash can photo posted on Emily's private Facebook story, one I wasn't supposed to see. The caption? "He thinks this little note scares me. Try harder, baby brother." I stared at that screen for a long time. That was when something inside me shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was something colder, deeper. A few days passed with radio silence. I didn't hear from either of them. Mr. Rios filed the eviction paperwork, and I waited. I floated between friends' places and spent every spare moment either at work or researching tenants' rights, lease protections, and how long I might have to wait for this circus to end. Then came the kicker. I got a notification from my bank. A $120 charge at a home decor store I'd used before, followed by another $200 at a furniture outlet, then groceries, then a delivery service, all charged to my card. I froze, dug deeper, realized I'd never canceled the spare card I had left in a drawer at the apartment, the one I hadn't used in months. Emily had found it. I called the bank, froze the account, and disputed every charge. Then I called my mom. Again. This time, I didn't even say hello. "She's using my card now." A pause. Then, "I'm sure it's just for necessities." She wouldn't do that maliciously. She bought a standing mirror and a wine rack. Silence. "I'm reporting this," I said. "To the police." "You'd send your own sister to jail?" "She's not acting like a sister." That night, I did report it. I showed them the bank statements, the Facebook story, the lease. Officer Marks took notes and promised to escalate it. They couldn't arrest her yet, but they added it to the case. It was starting to look a lot more like fraud. Still, nothing changed. Emily stayed. The eviction court date was weeks away. I was losing sleep, weight, and what little faith I had left in family. Then, about 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello. Is this Brandon Harper?" "Yeah. This is Ms. Kessler from the Family Department of Child Protective Services. We'd like to speak with you about a guardianship inquiry filed in your name for a minor, Jamie Harper." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "It says here you applied to assume guardianship of your nephew due to unsafe living conditions in the current home." I didn't file anything. A pause. Shuffling papers. "Strange. The document has your name. Your signature. Even your ID, although it looks a bit off. They emailed it to me. I opened the file and saw my name signed at the bottom of a guardianship request. But the signature was wrong. My name was misspelled on one page. The photo ID was a cropped scan of an old employee badge I'd lost years ago. It was fake. Emily, or someone helping her, was trying to frame me. Whether it was to scare me off, delay the eviction, or paint me as some villain, I didn't know. But it was a line crossed so far it wasn't even visible anymore. I called my mom in a fury. She didn't answer. So I went to her house. She opened the door wearing an apron, as if this were just any other Thursday. "Brandon, please don't barge in." I held up my phone. She forged my signature on a guardianship request. She tried to make it look like I was trying to take her kid. Her face paled, but only for a second. Then it hardened. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." "There isn't. And if you don't help me fix this, you're going down with her." Her lips tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Closed it. I waited. And then she said, in the coldest tone I've ever heard from her, "You always resented her. Don't pretend you didn't. Maybe she's not perfect, but at least she never abandoned her family." That was the last thing she said before shutting the door in my face. And that was the moment it all shattered. The loyalty, the guilt, the idea that maybe, just maybe, my mom still saw me as her son. She didn't. To her, I was disposable, replaceable, a stepping stone for the daughter who needed it more. And that's when I knew. I wasn't getting my home back by waiting. I had to take it back. But I wasn't going to scream or break windows or throw punches. I was going to do it by the book, by the system they thought I didn't understand. And by the time I was done, they'd wish they'd never touched a single thing that belonged to me. Especially the lease. Especially the card. Especially the name they tried to fake. But before that revenge could begin, before I even set my plan in motion, something happened that I didn't expect. Something that changed everything again. And not in a good way. For the first time in my adult life, I stopped showing up to work early. I still got there on time. I wasn't about to give Emily or my mom that satisfaction, but I stopped clocking in an hour ahead, stopped volunteering for double shifts. The fire I'd always had, the hustle, the drive, the constant push to get ahead, had sputtered out like someone poured cold water on it. And I couldn't fake it anymore. My manager noticed. So did my coworkers. But no one said anything. Not yet. I was sleeping on Darren's couch for the third week in a row by then. He never complained. He gave me space, kept things chill, and didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. But I saw the look on his face when I forgot to take the trash out again. When I left my laundry in the washer too long. When I barely said a word during a whole dinner. I was unraveling. Quietly. Slowly. The eviction hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, but every day dragged like molasses. Meanwhile, Emily was living it up in my apartment. Her Instagram had gone from quiet divorcee vibes to full-on influencer energy. Photos of her cozy new space, my apartment, Jamie eating cereal at my kitchen island, still my cereal, and a post that almost made me throw my phone across the room. Sometimes life surprises you with a fresh start. Thank you to everyone who supported me when I had nothing. I was blocked from viewing it, of course. But people talk. Screenshots get shared. My cousin sent it to me with a simple text. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The weight of everything pressed on me. The betrayal. The silence. The fact that my own mother hadn't even called to check if I was okay. Not once. Not after the fake guardianship filing. Not after the charges on my card. Not after she slammed the door in my face. I started having dreams about keys. I'd be standing at a door, sometimes my apartment, sometimes my childhood home, and no matter how many keys I tried, none of them worked. The locks would melt, twist, or vanish entirely. And I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, on a couch that wasn't mine. That was rock bottom. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a quiet, steady erosion of everything I'd built. And then one morning, something small shifted. It was Darren. He was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, flipping through a tablet, and he glanced up at me. "You still got that drill?" I blinked. "What?" "The power drill. You let me borrow it when I moved in. Still works like a beast." "Yeah." "What?" He nodded toward the tablet. "My landlord's letting me redo the shelves in the laundry room. Said I could put in some custom ones if I supply the labor." "You in?" I didn't answer right away, but something about the way he said it, like it was normal, like I wasn't a ghost. "Sure," I said. "Why not?" It took us all of an hour. Basic install, but it felt good to do something. to hold tools again, to measure and cut and sand. My hands remembered the rhythm even if my heart was still playing catch-up. The next weekend, we tackled his bedroom closet, then his kitchen backsplash. Darren kept finding excuses to bring me into projects, and I didn't fight it. I didn't talk much, but I showed up. I worked, and slowly, something started to come back. Darren noticed. One night over takeout, he said, "You ever think about doing this full-time?" "What?" "Handyman stuff. Repairs. Installations. You're good at it, man." I shook my head. "Nah, that's just side stuff." "Why not? You got a knack. You're detail-oriented. You don't cut corners. Half the guys on Craigslist don't even bring a level. You could charge double and still get booked." I didn't say anything. But that night, I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Handyman licensing. Small business registration. Website templates. I didn't sleep much, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't from anxiety. It was hope. Over the next few days, I juggled work with research. Started making lists. Tools I already had. Tools I needed. Services I could offer. Price ranges. Insurance. Tax stuff. The logistics were dizzying, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in weeks, I was building something. A few days later, Darren let me tag along on a job he was doing for a coworker, mounting a TV and fixing a broken cabinet. I did most of the work. Darren watched, cracked jokes, offered beer after. The coworker tipped us both. "You're a pro," he said. "You do this full time?" I didn't lie. Not yet. That night, I bought a domain name, harperfixit.com. Simple, clean, professional. I made a basic logo, set up an email address, and started working on a one-page site. Nothing fancy, just enough to look legit. I signed up for a few gig apps, threw my profile on TaskMatch, and waited. 2 days later, I got my first booking. Some woman needed her garage shelving reinforced. I showed up early, tools in hand, and did the job in an hour. She tipped me $40 on top of my rate and left a 5-star review. I stared at that review like it was a trophy. Not because of the money, though, yeah, that helped, but because it was validation. Proof that I was still me, even after everything. That I could still provide value. Still build. Word spread slowly. A few more jobs came in. I updated my site. Got business cards printed. Harper Fixit became more than just a name. It became my way out. And through it all, I kept things quiet. No posts. No texts to my mom. No comments on Emily's nonsense. I didn't try to justify myself to the family group chat that had gone oddly silent since everything happened. Let them think I was broken. Let them think I was licking my wounds in some basement. I was building, planning, and I wasn't just getting my apartment back anymore. I was getting my life back. But the next twist? That came out of nowhere. It was a Saturday afternoon when I got a message on the Harper Fixit contact form. The name listed? Rick. Yeah, that Rick. Emily's ex. The subject line just said, "Job inquiry. Need help with garage conversion." I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I read it again. "Hey, not sure if this is the right Brandon, but if it is, I need some work done. Converting my garage into a home office. Saw your site through a neighborhood group. Let me know if you're available. Also, sorry about everything. I heard what happened. I didn't even know how to process it. Why was he reaching out? And what did he know?" I didn't reply right away. I thought about it for a whole day. Then I typed a response. "Hey, Rick. Yeah, it's me. Let's talk." We scheduled a call. 5 minutes in, I realized he wasn't the same guy Emily had painted him to be. "I'm not here to pick sides," he said. "But I thought you should know. Emily's version of things isn't exactly the truth." "No kidding." He hesitated, then added, "She told her new boyfriend that you kicked her out of your own apartment to punish her. Said you were jealous of her being a single mom and wanted to prove a point." I laughed. A short, humorless bark. I didn't even know she had a boyfriend. "Yeah, they met last month. He doesn't know the half of it." That stuck with me. Emily was spinning stories, crafting a whole new narrative about what happened, about me, while I was quietly picking up the broken pieces. And that's when I knew. I couldn't just sit back and wait for the eviction hearing. I needed leverage. I needed proof. So I started collecting. Screenshots of Emily's posts. Bank records showing the charges on my card. Emails with timestamps. Photos of the fake guardianship documents. Even Rick offered to write a statement confirming that Emily had bragged about squatting in my place. I saved it all. Categorized everything in folders. Printed copies. Backed it up twice. Because I wasn't just preparing for eviction court anymore. I was preparing for war. But just when I thought I had everything under control, just when I thought I was done falling, I got a call from Mr. Rios. "Brandon," he said, voice grim. "You need to come to the apartment. Now." My stomach sank. "What happened?" "She's not here. But there's something you need to see." I dropped everything and drove over. When I got there, the door was open. The lock was busted. Mr. Rios stood just inside the living room, his face unreadable. I stepped past him and froze. The place was trashed. Furniture overturned. Walls scuffed. Cabinets left open. Broken glass in the kitchen. My TV gone. So was the microwave. And the shelves I installed in the hallway. She hadn't just moved out. She'd cleared the place. And left me with the wreckage. Mr. Rios handed me a folded note he'd found taped to the fridge. In sloppy handwriting, it read, "Thanks for the free ride. Good luck fixing this dump. Maybe next time, don't be such a selfish little snake." And below that, a smudged smiley face. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where my couch used to be. The apartment I'd bled for, worked for, lived for, gone. But weirdly, I didn't feel broken. Not anymore. Because what Emily didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already taken photos of everything before. That I had receipts, witnesses, a timeline. She'd think she won, that she'd taken the last word. But she hadn't seen the new Brandon. The one who knew how to rebuild. The one who was going to make every single one of them pay. Legally, carefully, and with a smile. Because the fall was over. And the rise? It had just begun. It's funny how losing everything can make you see clearly. I stood in the center of my trashed apartment. Floor littered with glass shards. Drywall dented like someone had taken a bat to it. And felt calm. Not numb. Not broken. Just still. Like the kind of silence you hear right before a storm starts rolling in. The calm before. Mr. Rios was pacing by the door, muttering about insurance and damages, but I tuned him out. My eyes traced every missing piece. The stolen microwave. The gutted TV stand. The decorative light fixtures I'd installed myself, gone. The shelves I'd measured and leveled to perfection, ripped from the walls, screws still embedded in the paint. It wasn't vandalism. It was intentional. Emily hadn't just moved out. She'd emptied the place like it was a hotel room she never planned to pay for. And then she left that note. "Thanks for the free ride. Good luck fixing this dump." She thought that was the final move. She thought she'd won. But all she'd done was hand me exactly what I needed. Because now I didn't just have eviction paperwork. I had evidence of theft, destruction of property, and malicious intent. I had photos of the apartment before and after. I had bank records. I had the fake guardianship filing she tried to sneak under my name. I had Rick, her ex-husband, willing to testify. And more than anything, I had no fear left. No ties. No illusions. No mercy. Once Mr. Rios filed the police report for damages and left to contact his insurance company, I stayed behind. I sat on the floor, bare, cold, and stained with something sticky I didn't want to identify, and started making lists. The kind of lists you only make when you're past the point of heartbreak. Step by step. Methodical. 1. Police report. Already filed by Mr. Rios. I'd add to it with the missing items list, photos, and any receipts I could dig up. My bank statements would show some of the stolen electronics had been charged to my card. 2. Legal prep. The eviction hearing was still on the books, but now I had grounds for civil damages and possible criminal charges. I needed a lawyer. Not a flashy one. Just someone sharp, quiet, and thorough. 3. Financial lockdown. All my cards had been changed, my credit monitored. But I ordered a new freeze on any line of credit and flagged my name with the 3 major bureaus just in case Emily tried something again. 4. The guardianship forgery. That needed to be escalated. I'd already filed the report with CPS and provided a copy to the police. Now it was time to push. Hard. 5. Character witnesses. Rick. Darren. Even a few co-workers who knew the timeline. I started reaching out. Not to gossip, not to vent. Just to ask for formal statements. Every one of them agreed without hesitation. By the end of the night, I had 5 folders, physical and digital, labeled lease and property, fraud and identity theft, financial theft, witness statements, timeline and evidence. I was building a case, not just for court, but for everything. Because here's the thing about people like Emily, and, unfortunately, people like my mother too. They rely on you staying quiet. They feed on guilt, on family ties, on the idea that you won't dare fight back. But I'd already fought my way out of the dirt to buy that apartment. Worked double shifts. Learned how to tile a bathroom from scratch. I'd clawed every inch of success with no help. And now, I had nothing left to lose. So I started making calls. The first was to Rick. "I need that statement," I said. "The one you offered. In writing." He didn't hesitate. "You got it." 2 days later, I had a signed, notarized letter describing everything Emily had told him. How she admitted to changing the locks, laughed about taking over the place, and called me too weak to do anything about it. Rick even offered screenshots of texts she'd sent him during the move, bragging about living rent-free and showing Brandon how things work in the real world. That went into folder number 4. Next, I contacted CPS again and pushed the forgery issue. I told them I had proof the document submitted was not only falsified, but part of a larger harassment pattern. I was calm, respectful, but firm. And that's when I got a name, Detective Owens. He was being assigned to the forgery case. I emailed him the entire folder. Every file, every photo, every discrepancy in the forged form. Within a day, he replied. Short and simple. Received. This is being escalated for formal review. We'll update you shortly. Momentum. I could feel it building. Meanwhile, Mr. Rios hired a contractor to assess the damage. He brought me along to walk through the apartment and confirm what had been taken or destroyed. The contractor whistled under his breath. She ripped out the light sockets too? Man, that's spite. That's not even theft. That's just mean. We both laughed, but mine was hollow. Still, I took pictures, measured what needed repair, saved every invoice the contractor sent Mr. Rios. I offered to help fix it myself. Rios declined. You've done enough. Focus on the case. I'll handle the apartment. The next piece of the setup was harder. I had to talk to my mom. Not because I wanted closure. I didn't. I just needed to hear what she knew. And more importantly, what she didn't. I showed up at her house unannounced. She opened the door wearing a knitted shawl and holding a half-eaten apple. She blinked. Brandon, I'm not here to fight, I said. I just want clarity. She let me in with a sigh. The house smelled like lavender and lemon polish. Familiar, in a painful way. I sat on the couch. She stood by the doorway like a chaperone. I need to know, I said. Did you help her forge those documents? Her face shifted. Not shocked, but hurt. Performatively hurt. I didn't forge anything, she said quietly. She showed me a paper and said it was part of custody arrangements. I didn't ask questions. I stared at her. Did you read it? No. Did you see my signature? I don't remember. I believed her, but I didn't forgive her. Emily's in trouble, I said. This won't end well for her. She's your sister, Brandon. She's a criminal, Mom. She looked down, and I realized she already knew. Not just about the document. About everything. The fake charges. The vandalism. The manipulation. She had to know. She just didn't want to face it. I stood. I won't let her do this again. Not to me. Not to anyone. Mom said nothing. She didn't follow me to the door. And that silence told me more than words ever could. She'd chosen her side, which made mine easier to choose. I cut all contact after that. Changed my number. Blocked both of them on everything. Darren helped me set up call filters so their names would never show up again. And I went back to work. Not at the warehouse. That chapter was done. I was Harper Fix-It now. Full-time. I'd built up enough momentum, enough word-of-mouth jobs, repeat clients, and glowing reviews that I could finally let go of the 9-to-5 grind. I registered my business officially, paid the licensing fees, started offering package deals. I even invested in better gear, tools I dreamed of when I was broke, scouring clearance aisles. By the end of the month, I had 3 weeks worth of appointments lined up. My own logo on a white van, branded polos, and a folding workbench with my name etched into the side. I was making more in a week than I used to in a month. But I didn't post about it. Didn't brag. Because this wasn't for Emily. This was for me. Still, part of me wanted her to know. To see what I'd built from the ashes she left behind. And I'd get that chance. Because then, out of nowhere, I got an email. From an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just read. From Jamie, with help from my friend's mom. My heart stopped. I opened it. Hi, Uncle Brandon. I don't know if you're mad at me too. Mom said you hate us now, but I don't believe that. I miss you. Can I see you sometime? Attached was a drawing. Crayon on paper. A stick figure me with a big wrench in one hand and a smile. Standing next to a little kid holding a toolbox. It broke me. and it reminded me exactly why I had to finish this. Not just for justice, but to protect the next person Emily tried to manipulate, even if it was her own son. So I made my final list. 1. Deliver all evidence to Detective Owens and follow up weekly. 2. Confirm police report for damages with Mr. Rios and sign affidavit. 3. Finalize civil lawsuit paperwork with attorney. 4. Notify CPS of Jamie's letter without pushing contact. 5. Prepare public-facing post if needed. Something honest, calm, with facts. Because if Emily wanted to spin lies, fine. But I had the truth, and the law, and momentum. I was done playing defense. Now it was my move. The final move didn't come in a dramatic courtroom scene or some screaming confrontation in a parking lot. That would have been too easy, too loud. Emily always thrived on drama. Chaos was her currency. So I chose the one weapon she could never understand. Silence. Steady, strategic, legal silence. I waited for the hearing. The eviction case that had started everything was finally going to court, and despite everything Emily had done, she still showed up late. No lawyer. No apology. Just a cheap white blouse and that same smug smirk she'd worn the day she changed the locks to my apartment. She didn't even look at me when she walked in. Didn't glance at the folder I placed neatly on the desk in front of me, labeled in bold. Evidence of theft and fraud, Emily Harper. I had everything inside. Receipts for the missing electronics. Photos of the damage she caused. Screenshots of her social media posts bragging about living in my apartment rent-free. Rick's notarized statement. Police reports. The bank fraud paperwork. The guardianship forgery. The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with no time for games, didn't need long. After barely 20 minutes, she ruled in my favor. Immediate eviction was granted, retroactively applied since Emily had already vacated. Mr. Rios was awarded damages for the destruction of the property. I was awarded restitution for theft and unauthorized credit card usage. Emily didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her face did all the talking. And when the judge asked her if she had anything to add before closing, she finally opened her mouth. "He's blowing this out of proportion," she said. "It was just family helping family." The judge stared at her. "That's not what the evidence says, Miss Harper. This isn't a family matter anymore. It's a legal one." That was the first crack. But the real hit came a week later. Detective Owens called me with an update. The forgery of the guardianship request wasn't just a misdemeanor. It had crossed the line into criminal territory. Emily had submitted a falsified document to a government agency. Combined with the statement from CPS and the falsified ID she used, it was enough for the DA to press charges. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. A court date was set. A public defender was assigned to her, since she couldn't afford her own lawyer. And despite everything, she still tried to spin it like I was the one who betrayed her. I didn't respond to the texts. I didn't call her back when she left a voicemail saying, "This could ruin me, Brandon. Think about Jamie." Jamie. I had been thinking about Jamie. I didn't reply to him after that first message, not directly. But I did contact CPS again. Quietly. Carefully. I told them I wasn't trying to seek custody. I just wanted to make sure Jamie was safe. I gave them everything I had. Her living conditions. Her instability. Her manipulations. I even forwarded the messages she'd sent about using Jamie to guilt me. They thanked me. Said they'd take it from there. A few weeks later, I heard through Rick that he'd filed for full custody. Apparently, CPS had reached out for a home check. That's when they discovered Emily had been leaving Jamie with friends for days at a time, bouncing between boyfriends' houses and still trying to figure things out. She failed to appear at a scheduled follow-up. Then she failed another. That was it. Rick got temporary custody. Full legal custody was pending a hearing, but Jamie was already living with him. Emily's world? Crumbling. And she couldn't stop it. She tried to call me again, this time sobbing into the phone, her voice hoarse. "I messed up, okay? I didn't mean to go that far. I was desperate. Can't we fix this?" I didn't answer. I'd already blocked her number. It was Darren who finally said what I'd been thinking all along. "You didn't destroy her, man. She did that herself. All you did was stop her from doing it to you again." By then, Harper Fix-It was booming. I had 3 guys working with me now, 2 part-time, 1 full-time. We were booked out for 3 months in advance. I had an LLC, a tax ID, and a logo on the side of my work van. I even got invited to speak at a local entrepreneurship event. Life wasn't perfect. There were still nights I'd stare at the ceiling wondering how I let it go so far. Still moments when I'd remember a birthday or a holiday and feel the hollow space where family used to be. But I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. That's not the same thing. The last piece fell into place 6 months after the eviction. I got a letter from the court. Emily pled guilty to reduced charges under a deal. She'd avoid jail time, but she'd have a record. A hefty fine, mandatory counseling, community service, probation. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was enough. And when I walked back into that apartment, freshly repainted, the smell of sawdust and lemon oil in the air, I stood in the middle of the living room, closed my eyes, and breathed in. It was quiet. It was clean. It was mine again. No noise. No lies. Just me. I'd started from nothing, lost everything, and built it all again. But this time, stronger, smarter, and with the kind of peace no one could take away. Not Emily. Not even my mom. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is just rebuilding quietly and letting them watch. She stole my home, so I built a life she could never break into. My name's Alex. I'm 31, single, and apparently invisible, at least to my own family. You wouldn't think so, considering I'm the one who helped pay off my parents' second mortgage, covered my sister's tuition shortfall, and lent my brother $5,000 2 years ago when his startup was tanking. He never paid me back, by the way, but I didn't mind. I've done okay for myself. Quiet job in software, decent apartment, nothing flashy. I've always been the reliable one. The guy who shows up, foots the bill, stays out of drama. I never expected to be celebrated, but I sure didn't expect to be dismissed either. So when my brother Ryan got engaged to Taylor, a girl who once described my job as adorably average, I kept my mouth shut. Not because I liked her, I didn't, but because Ryan seemed happy. And I figured, maybe if I played nice, she'd eventually stop treating me like I was part of the catering staff. I bought a suit, RSVP'd early, even offered to help out with last-minute wedding logistics. No reply. Not a thank you. Not a we've got it handled, just silence. At the time, I chalked it up to wedding stress. The week before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off the $2,000 check I'd written as my wedding gift. I handed it to my mom with a smile and a little card I'd written by hand. She barely glanced at it. Taylor's parents are covering most of it, she said, waving vaguely at the dining room covered in RSVP cards and half-glued centerpieces. They're a very involved family. Very organized. She said it like that was some kind of warning. I should have known better. That tone always meant stay in your lane. The night before the wedding, they had a rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited. When I asked Ryan about it, he muttered something about keeping it small and mostly wedding party only. I laughed it off, even though my gut twisted a little. I reminded myself it was his wedding. Maybe I was being too sensitive. The day of the wedding, I arrived early, wearing the nicest suit I owned. I even brought a small camera to take casual photos. I was really trying to be supportive. The venue was stunning, I'll give them that. A lakeside lodge, sunlight bouncing off the water, strings of white lights hanging from oak beams. But the moment I walked in, I could tell something was off. The usher looked confused when I gave him my name. He flipped through the seating chart twice before he pointed, awkwardly, toward the far back corner of the reception hall. You're at table 18, I think, he said, avoiding eye contact. I walked over, expecting maybe a quiet table for distant relatives or friends of friends. What I found instead was a rickety folding chair wedged behind a giant wooden column, half hidden from the rest of the room. The chair wobbled when I sat. And to my left, one of the DJ's massive speaker stands. It was like they found the one spot in the entire venue guaranteed to make you feel like an afterthought, and assigned it to me on purpose. I stood back up and double-checked the place card. My name, spelled correctly. No mistake. As I glanced around, I spotted some familiar faces. My cousin Josh and his fiancée had a prime table dead center. Ryan's old college roommate, who he hasn't spoken to in years, had a front row view. Even Mr. Benson, Ryan's high school chemistry lab partner, was seated next to the bride's aunt like he was royalty. I took a breath and walked up to the woman overseeing the seating. She wore a headset and carried a clipboard. Before I could speak, she pointed curtly. Back there, she said, not even looking up. I said, actually, I'm just wondering if there's been a mix-up. I'm the groom's brother. That's when Taylor's mother, Madeline, walked by and actually stopped to chime in. She gave me a once-over, lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. Oh, she said sweetly. That was Taylor's decision. She said you weren't really part of their side of the family. We wanted the close family up front. I stared at her. I'm his brother. She shrugged, then added with a patronizing little smile, but you're not in the wedding party, are you? I didn't say anything. I just walked back to my chair and sat down, even though my legs were trembling with something halfway between disbelief and rage. I couldn't even see the head table from where I was. When the music started and everyone stood for the bride, I had to lean to the side of the column just to catch a glimpse. Nobody noticed me. Nobody cared. During dinner, no one sat at my table. Apparently, it had been reserved for overflow. The other chairs were empty. I spent an hour pretending to look at my phone, trying to keep my composure. But the boiling point hit during the toasts. Ryan's best man told a half-funny story about college. Taylor's sister gushed about how much Taylor had dreamed of this day since she was little. And then someone handed the mic to Taylor's father, who said, "We're so grateful to have every single person here with us tonight. Each and every guest here was chosen because you mean something deeply to Taylor and Ryan." That did it. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out the card I'd written. I tucked the $2,000 check inside, no cash, just a paper check with a small note on the memo line that said, "For your future." I walked up toward the head table, toward the mic. I could see people glancing, confused. One of the groomsmen furrowed his brow as I approached. I didn't ask permission. I just took the mic. "Hi. Sorry to interrupt," I said. I smiled, but it felt tight. The room quieted. I just wanted to say congrats to the happy couple. Truly. May your marriage last longer than my respect for you. And then, while the room held its collective breath, I reached over and plucked the envelope from the gift table. There was a small gasp from someone, I don't know who. Ryan's face turned white. Taylor blinked like I'd just spoken Latin. Madeline, across the room, looked ready to lunge at me. But I didn't wait. I set the mic gently back down, no dramatic drop, just enough to hear the soft thump, and walked straight out the door, past the DJ, past the caterers, past the valet trying to hand me a ticket stub. I didn't stop until I hit the parking lot. And that's where things really started to unravel. I didn't drive off right away. I just sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, watching guests file out behind me like ants scrambling from a shaken hill. I can see faces peering through the windows of the lodge, murmurs rippling across the crowd like I just yanked the curtain down on a play and revealed the whole thing was fake. Good. Let them talk. Let them ask why the groom's brother just took back his check and walked out mid-toast. My phone buzzed. First it was Ryan, just his name flashing across the screen. I didn't answer. Then came a barrage of texts. He texted, "What was that? You embarrassed me. In front of everyone. We need to talk. Now." Then Taylor chimed in, "That was classless. This is MY Day. You've always been jealous. I see it now. You owe Ryan an apology." I tossed my phone into the passenger seat like it was radioactive. I wasn't going to dignify any of that with a response, at least not yet. Later that night, I stayed in a hotel. Didn't want to go home. I needed distance. I didn't even sleep, just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. Thinking about how long I'd been treated like a placeholder in my own family. How many holidays I spent quietly helping behind the scenes while Ryan got all the attention. How every conversation with Taylor had felt like a performance where I was the janitor awkwardly walking through the middle of a ballroom. The next morning, I stopped by my apartment to shower and change. That's when the group text started blowing up. Apparently, word had gotten around. A few cousins texted me privately, saying they didn't know what happened, but they'd noticed how I was treated. Turns out several people had wanted to sit with me, but they were told my table was reserved. Reserved for what? Humiliation? Then I got a call from Mom. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message in her tight, "Don't you dare disobey me" tone. "Alex, I don't know what's gotten into you, but your little stunt ruined the reception. Ryan and Taylor are devastated. Call me back immediately." I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a walk around the city, got a coffee, sat by the river. Tried to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that what happened wasn't just bad manners, it was a statement. A deliberate message, "You're not one of us." It hurt more than I'd expected. And the worst part? I kept thinking about the little note I'd written in that card. It said, "Wishing you a love that lifts each other higher, the way families should." It suddenly felt like a punchline to a cruel joke. By that evening, things had shifted. I logged into Facebook, something I rarely do, and saw the first wave of wedding photos flooding in. Professional shots. Picture-perfect angles. Taylor's face plastered with that practiced pageant smile. Ryan grinning like he hadn't just watched his own brother walk out on him. But then, The comments. It started small. Someone asked, "Hey, where's Alex in all the group shots?" Then another, "Didn't Alex give a toast? I thought I saw him up there." And slowly, people began to notice. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. The silence around my absence spoke louder than any caption could. That night, Ryan showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door right away. He knocked 3 times, then called out, "Come on, man. Please." I opened it a crack. He looked exhausted. Hair messy. Shirt wrinkled. Not the confident groom I'd seen yesterday. Just my brother, looking smaller somehow. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in. He sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't know if he was allowed to get comfortable. I stayed standing. "I didn't know they were going to seat you back there," he said. I stared. "You didn't notice your own brother wasn't at the front? At a table? Sitting alone behind a column?" He rubbed his face. I was focused on everything else. Taylor's family was in charge of the seating. Her mom's obsessed with controlling every detail. I didn't want to fight her on it. I raised my eyebrows. "So you just didn't fight at all?" He hesitated. "I thought you wouldn't care. You always say you don't like attention." I laughed. A bitter, ugly laugh. "Yeah, I don't like attention. Doesn't mean I like being shoved behind the damn speaker like I'm an extra in your life." He winced. "Okay, that's fair." There was a long silence. Then he added, "Taylor thinks you owe her an apology." I just stared at him. He looked up slowly. "I'm not saying I agree. I want things to go back to normal." I folded my arms. "Normal is you taking and me being quiet about it. That's over." Another pause. "Finally," he said, "so what now?" And that was the question, wasn't it? What now? After a lifetime of being the backup plan, the silent support, the forgotten brother who still showed up anyway. I hadn't decided yet. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going back to the way things were. And Ryan knew it, too. Because as he stood to leave, he turned at the door and said, "You really took the check?" I met his eyes. "Yeah, I did." His voice dropped. "She's furious. Her mom, too." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll remember that next time they treat someone like furniture." And with that, I shut the door. I didn't hear from Ryan for a few days after that. And honestly, I didn't expect to. The conversation ended with a kind of quiet finality, like we both realized we were standing on opposite ends of a bridge that had been slowly crumbling for years. And maybe I'd just been the first one to stop pretending it was still holding us up. But while Ryan kept his distance, Taylor and her mother, they went on a full-blown PR campaign. Suddenly, subtle little barbs started popping up on social media. Taylor posted a filtered wedding photo with the caption, "So grateful for the people who actually support our love." Madeline followed up with one of her own. "You can't choose your family, but thank God we chose ours." Comments rolled in, some sympathetic, some confused. A few people tagged me with, "Where were you?" or "Did you leave early, but I didn't bite." Instead, I decided it was time to stop playing defense. See, here's the thing. I didn't want revenge just to hurt them. I wanted clarity. I wanted the whole family to see what had really happened. Because if I've learned anything, it's that silence protects the wrong people. So I made a decision. I was going to take back the narrative, and I knew exactly how. A week later, I sent out a message to our extended family group chat. You know, the one where birthday wishes get forgotten, but passive-aggressive memes from aunts never stop. I kept it short. "Hey everyone. Just wanted to clear the air about the wedding before any more stories spread." I was invited. I showed up early, dressed up, and brought a $2,000 gift. I was seated behind a column, alone, next to the speakers. When I politely asked if there'd been a mistake, Taylor's mother told me I wasn't really part of their side of the family. So I left. With my gift. Just wanted you to hear it from me, not whispers. Then I attached a photo of my name card, table 18, crooked on the linen, next to the towering DJ rig. I didn't editorialize. Didn't get nasty. I let the facts speak for themselves. The fallout? Immediate. Within minutes, the chat exploded. "Aunt Linda, what? I thought you weren't even invited." "Uncle Dean, that's disgusting. You're his brother." My cousin Jenna jumped in with a screenshot of the empty table. Then another cousin dropped a bomb. She'd overheard Taylor at the bridal shower saying, "We just need to keep his side low-key. They're not really photo material." Photo material. It was like someone lit a match in a room full of gasoline. People started calling Taylor out directly on her posts. Comment sections flooded with, "Wait, is this about Alex? And why would you treat family like that?" Taylor deleted 2 of her photos. Madeline's account went private, but it was too late. Then came the group message from my mom. Alex, that was incredibly disrespectful. We don't air family issues in public. I stared at it for a second before replying. Didn't seem to bother you when they humiliated me in front of 120 guests. She didn't reply, but other people did. Even some of Taylor's own relatives messaged me privately, saying they were horrified and had no idea I'd been treated that way. One of her cousins, someone I'd only met once, wrote, "You were literally the only person who showed up early and helped set up chairs. This is insane. I hadn't even remembered doing that. I guess when you're used to being the helper, you don't clock it anymore." But now came the part one hadn't even planned for. Turns out, Taylor's dad, Jeff, was a part owner in a business where I'd recently been negotiating a freelance contract. Nothing major, just a side project. But when he found out I was the brother who stole the spotlight, he told his assistant to pause discussions immediately. I only found out because the assistant forwarded me the memo by mistake. The subject line? Do not move forward with Alex. Too much drama. That was it. I wasn't even surprised. Just disappointed. Not because of the job, but because I realized they weren't done trying to punish me for having boundaries. So I decided to burn the last remaining bridge. I still had the card. The check had long been voided, but the note inside, the one I wrote when I still thought this wedding would mean something, was still folded neatly in my desk. I took a photo of it. Then I wrote a new one. I didn't send it privately. I posted it publicly. Here's what I originally gave my brother and his wife. Before I was treated like a wedding crasher at my own family's table. Before I was told I wasn't really part of their side. Before I was called classless for walking away from a situation where I was clearly not wanted. I've spent years putting everyone else first. Paying bills. Showing up. Staying quiet. This time, I chose myself. If that makes me the villain in your love story, so be it. No hashtags. No names. But everyone knew. That post got more likes than anything I'd ever put online. Dozens of people reached out. Some apologizing. Some venting about their own family drama. Some just saying, "Thank you for standing up for yourself." And Ryan? He texted me that night. Just one line. "You really done with all of us?" And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. "No, Ryan. I'm just done being invisible." I haven't spoken to him since. But I heard from Jenna that the next family gathering, Easter brunch at our parents' place, was awkward. No Taylor. No Madeline. And apparently, Ryan looked like he hadn't slept in days. Meanwhile, I took that $2,000 and booked a solo trip to Japan. I hiked in Kyoto, ate sushi by myself, sat in silence at a temple, and finally felt peace. Japan was the best decision I ever made. I didn't just go to get away from my family. I went to remember what it felt like to exist outside of them. No passive-aggressive phone calls. No group chats filled with birthday messages to people who forgot mine. No guilt-tripping from people who only knew how to take, never give. Just me. In Kyoto, I wandered alleyways lined with wooden houses, their bamboo fences draped with moss. I drank matcha in the mornings and watched temple bells echo across stone courtyards. I hiked through the Fushimi Inari gates in complete silence, red arches stretching out like a spine into the mountain. And in that quiet, somewhere between breath and sweat and the scent of pine, something in me clicked back into place. I was no longer angry. I was just done. While I was away, I got only one message from my family. A group text from my mother with a blurry photo of my niece holding an Easter egg and the caption, "We missed you." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't love my niece, but because I knew what my mom really meant. We missed what you used to do for us. We missed the version of you that didn't fight back. The version that smiled politely when seated behind a column. The version that wrote generous checks with no expectations. The version they didn't have to consider because they assumed he'd always just be there. But that version of me was gone. When I came back from Japan, my apartment felt different. Like it actually belonged to me now. I started redecorating. Not out of boredom, but with intent. I threw away the worn-out couch that my parents gave me when I first moved out. "It's still good enough for you," my dad had said. I bought a new one. Midnight blue. Velvet. Dramatic. Pointless, maybe. But mine. Work picked up. I said yes to a few new projects. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't made time for in years. Turns out when you stop bending over backward for people who barely see you, you finally notice all the doors that were waiting to open. But, of course, nothing stays quiet forever. It started with my mom. She showed up unannounced one Saturday morning. I heard the knock and saw her through the peephole, standing there with a Tupperware of lemon bars like this was some sitcom scene. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, then tried the handle. "Alex," she called out. "Are you home?" I waited in silence. She stood there for another minute, then finally left the lemon bars on the welcome mat and walked away. I tossed them in the trash. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email. An actual handwritten letter in my father's rigid cursive. "Son, your mother is very upset. We feel this rift has gone on long enough. You've made your point. Let's put this behind us. Ryan and Taylor are trying to move on, and you should too. No family is perfect. Let's have dinner next Sunday and talk this out. You're still our son. We still love you." That it should have made me feel something. It didn't. Because here's what that letter didn't say. "I'm sorry." Not once. No acknowledgement of what they let happen. No apology for dismissing me, for ignoring me, for watching me be treated like a stranger and deciding it wasn't their place to interfere. Just a gentle guilt trip wrapped in, "Let's move on," so they wouldn't have to deal with the truth. So I wrote back, "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm glad you love me. But love without respect is just possession. You raised me to believe in family, but somewhere along the way, that word started to mean the people you tolerate, no matter how they treat you. I don't agree. I showed up. I supported all of you for years. Quietly. Consistently. And when I asked for nothing, you assumed I needed nothing. But when I finally drew a line, you acted like I set the house on fire. You didn't miss me. You missed the version of me who didn't stand up for himself. That person is gone. I'm not coming to dinner. I'm not ready to pretend everything's okay just because it's convenient. If you ever want to have a real conversation with real accountability, I'll be here. But until then, please stop knocking on my door expecting the past to answer. Alex, I mailed it. No dramatic mic drop. No social media post. Just a quiet statement of truth, sent in the same envelope my father used to reach out. I don't know what they did after reading it. I don't know if they cried, or screamed, or tore it up. I just know they didn't reply. That silence? That was the loudest apology they could give me. As for Ryan and Taylor, a rumor had it things weren't exactly going great. Jenna told me Taylor had been pushing Ryan to cut ties with toxic influences, which, translated from Taylor speak, meant anyone who doesn't kiss her ring. Apparently, Ryan resisted. He's stubborn, but not blind. Maybe he finally saw what she was. The last time I saw him was by chance, at a cafe, mid-morning, both of us alone. We made eye contact. He nodded once. I nodded back. That was it. No words. Just two brothers, both changed, both pretending the weight between them was just air. But you know what? I was okay with that. Because for once, I wasn't looking for his approval. I had already given it to myself. And that might sound small. But when you've spent your life being told you're a side character in someone else's story, learning to be the main character in your own is the biggest plot twist there is. I'm not bitter. Not anymore. I'm building something new now. Something that doesn't require me to sacrifice dignity for inclusion. And if someday my family decides to knock on my door with more than lemon bars and hollow letters, if they come with real humility, real apology, real change, I'll listen. But until then, I'll be here. In my blue velvet couch. In my apartment that feels like peace. In my life that finally feels like mine.